Hello, this is Kris Nelson from evolveconsciousness.org. I'll be reading the etymological article on characters and our character. It's a little wordplay on the characters in our language and our character, our moral character. So as you can see, this deals with morality. Because when you look at the word morality, character is an important word in there. This was published on the 3rd of December 2014. Now, this started off as research into the word morality itself, another little word journey and weaving a larger tapestry from it. So the word morality, it's related to moral qualities, instruction, morals, manner, character, from the Latin moralis, proper behavior, manners. In Greek there's ethikos, and in Latin there's mos, and that means disposition. So the word morality was coined by Cicero to translate the Greek ethikos. You can see how morality and ethics are closely linked. Essentially the same, despite the battle on trying to differentiate them and make them different. It's just like trying to say that passion is different from pathos, or pathos is different from passion, even though one's a Latin word for the Greek word. They have a little bit of difference, but they essentially mean the same. So if we look at disposition, that's an arrangement, an order. It's a state, like a state of mind. Then we look at dispose, from disposition. Dispose is control, regulate. It's dis, which means apart, and poner, so disponer. And poner is to put or place. So to place apart, to put apart, is what dispose is. So when you're doing that, I guess you're controlling and regulating something, you're setting things apart. You have control and regulation to do that. And we have dispose, and then from dispose we have position. So there's position, then there's disposition, and that's how the word got formed. So position, act or fact of placing, a situation, position, affirmation. And more of the breakdown on poner, put place, from apo, off, away, and siner, to leave, let. So it's to leave away, to leave off. Morals are qualities of behavior, manner, character, disposition. Morals are an arrangement, order, right? Because that's the goal of it. When you dispose yourself in a state of mind and you arrange and order your thoughts, your emotions, and then you act on them, you're controlling and regulating, you're placing apart. I think this is what I'm about to discuss there, but I'm just emphasizing this from the emboldened words. You're controlling and regulating yourselves apart from other people who may be living less morally. So you're setting things apart, because that's what truth does from falsity. That's the purpose of morality. If everything was moral, then you wouldn't be setting anything apart, because everything would be moral. So morality is because things can be immoral, and that's the state of our world, and it's been like that for a long, long time, where there's been conditions of immorality and morality, of falsity and truth, evil and good. So morals are an arrangement, order, and create a state of being from the will to control and regulate ourselves, placed apart from the unregulated passions, desires, whims, wants of the carnal, beastly, lower base animalistic consciousness. So we have, this makes more sense. You can look at it in terms of the aggregate, but you can look at it in terms of yourself. You place yourself apart. This is the alchemical inner work, where you divide things inside of you. You control and regulate yourself. This is part of sovereign self-dominion. It's self-control and self-mastery. So you're controlling and regulating yourself, pulling apart pieces, and you're leaving things. So siner, from position, you're leaving, you're letting it behind. So in alchemical process, you seek to learn the truth and morality so that you can compare it to yourself and then learn what is wrong, see the darkness, shadow, demon, negative, evil, immorality, and wrong within you, and then you can learn to let go of it and disintegrate it, disassemble it, deconstruct it from who you are, and then you let go of it. You put it apart, place it apart from you, and you rebuild yourself that way. So you place apart from the unregulated passions, desires, whims, wants of the carnal, beastly, lower base, animalistic consciousness. It's the process of evolving consciousness by letting go of those lower desires, those lower passions, the things that keep us in amoral living as immoral beings. To affirm ourselves into a position and situation of higher order living in alignment with the will of creation, higher self, true self. Beings who can discern morals are of a higher order consciousness, and this sets them apart from others who are not capable of harnessing this force of good to such a degree of potential manifestation. With this higher order consciousness comes higher order creative capabilities for good or evil. So some people can evolve their consciousness and learn of good and evil, but they choose the evil path. So you can have more creative potential with knowledge of yourself and the world to do evil, rather than choosing the right path of truly higher order consciousness. This is the ultimate personal responsibility we have to truth and morality, the force of good. Failure to understand reality and navigate it with humility under natural moral law will result in the creation of evil and devolution towards chaos. Ethics is the science of morals, the study of morals. So you can see how morals is the morals themselves, and then ethics is the science and study of, which I've had people argue with me because they don't understand the etymology. They don't even look at the etymology, so they just want to argue. From ethos, moral character, also related to ethos, custom. And we look at ethos, habitual character, and disposition. So again, ethics would be the science of morals, the study of morals. And ethos, well, that would be the morals themselves. As we saw above, character, disposition, habit, custom, manners, well, that's exactly what morality and moral was saying above. And this comes from the Proto-Indo-European root, S, and then W in parentheses, and then the E, so SWE. And then we have custom, which is a habit, usage, way, practice, tradition, familiarity. Becoming used to, accustom oneself. And again from the Proto-Indo-European SWE, which means oneself, as an idiom. And we have idiom, which is to appropriate to oneself, from idios, which is personal or private. Particular to oneself. And also the word identity comes from that same sort of root of I and then dem. It's edem, and it's related in some way, but it's not exactly the same thing. Just wanted to mention that since we're relating identities to oneself, well, this is a similar representation. Ethics is the study or science of morals, the arrangement and order of rules that sets moral apart from immoral, truth apart from falsity, reality apart from unreality. Ethics are now associated with the socially constructed customs, manners, and traditions in this larger context of setting standards in society for people to live in, quote, harmony and, quote, integrate well. So, I had previously differentiated morals from ethics as morals as the true way, true morality of right and wrong, and ethics was more society's impositions on what is right and wrong according to the customs. So you can see how you have the customs of yourself and you have the customs of society and the manners of society and the traditions of society. So this is all included in the word for ethic. So you can see how it gets twisted into a conformist aspect. And there's no problem with the conformist aspect as long as it's based in truth and morality and good and right. Yes, everyone has to conform to natural moral law. Everyone has to conform to the right codes of conduct, the way and the path. But when society does it as a false ethics, and they use the word and they create customs, manners, and traditions, well, those are usually all bullshit based in culture. And it's a cult. You're just brainwashed into, oh, well, you have to wear a burqa and you get stoned if you get raped, and if you get raped, well, we're going to rape you again, and all these screwed up Sharia law, all this bullshit. It's demented minds convincing other weak minds that to accept demented rules. And they become customs, manners, and traditions. So then it's proposed as, oh, this is the way to live in harmony and integrate together. We got to live as one. And oh, this is the way to heaven and the afterlife and all this other bullshit. It's all bullshit belief that weak minds buy into because they're insecure. They don't know themselves. They don't know how to be independent and think for themselves. They don't know what is the truth, what is moral, what is right. They have no clue because they're so conditioned into falsity. So every religionist is in this boat. Why? Because they are a religionist. They've chosen to acclimate their own independence to an acquiescence of a central authority and a central doctrine. And they just live by that as a robot. Ethic and custom are rooted in an earlier word, SWE, which is the meaning of idiom, appropriate to oneself, make particular to you. If one setting the standard of so-called ethics or custom is wrong, and no one corrects it, then it continues to be wrong. This is the case with human societies everywhere, to varying degrees of immorality. Each person is capable of knowing morality and possibly knowing it deeper than others who think they know it deeply. Yet few embark on this journey towards truth, morality, and greater self-realization. So as I was saying, people don't want to learn it, even though one person is capable of overturning what 1 million or 1 billion people believe that is false. We're not doing it individually. So you only have a few people who can see the lies, but since everyone believes in the customs, manners, and traditions of falsity, well, it keeps perpetuating. More people need to awaken to the true self, higher will, and align themselves with that, the will of creation. Conceptually, all these things, it just makes more sense. Or else you just say, well, align with the truth, and you don't. And you stay away from the concept of true self, higher will, all that. So you just make it basic. Well, it's about aligning with truth, love, good, right, morality. If you want to stay away from the other speculative concepts, you just keep it grounded that way. So we have character, which is an engraved mark. Right? That's what we do as a character. When we write things, it's an engraved mark. It's also a symbol or imprint on the soul. So here we go. That's why we have the word character to reflect morality, because it's supposed to reflect, quote, spirit, which is the, quote, soul, but that's all morality. That's all it is. They're just keywords for morality, because that's what the, quote, soul and, quote, spirit is, because you have the law comes from the Most High. The Most High is the higher. The Most High's will is the will of God, and that will creates the law of God. Conceptually, not of the Bible. Forget about that anthropomorphized, idiotic father figure. So the will of the Spirit is the will of God, the will of the Most High, the will of the higher self, and that's the higher will, and that's the spirit. And that's spirit is just, it's all about, spiritual is the will of the spirit. So spiritual is the will of the spirit, which is natural moral law, an aspect of it. So to live morally is to be spiritual. So the symbol or imprint on the soul, the engraved mark, is when you do things, so you have character. Your character is represented by your actions of your body while you're living. So that imprints upon who you are. Who you are is a reflection of what you do. Who you are here and now, from birth to death, is a reflection of what you do. So you want to do evil, well, you become evil. You want to do good, you become good. Stop doing evil, well, then you stop becoming evil. And that comes from the Proto-Indo-European root G-H-E-R, so ger or care, as I explained in the article on etymology of kind, kin, genus, and care. Care comes from G-A-R, and G and K and C are interchangeable, so it's ger, but it's cur, or it's gur, but it's cur. So character, it's a scraping and a scratching. So that's what you do when you engrave and mark things, right? You scrape and scratch. So that's why your actions reflect who you are, because every action you take of evil or not evil, well, that puts a scraper and a scratch, an engraving on who you are, your character, your moral essence, who you are choosing to be. So here's my explanation. Character is a part of our nature. What matters? Well, who we become as I don't know. Because you have human nature as the true nature versus our condition. So there's the two aspects to nature, that higher aspect, and then well, character is a part of our nature. What matters? Yeah. Since it reflects morality, and our true nature is morality, so I guess that still stands. Character is multiple as well. We have a character, but it's not singular in scope. There are the characteristics, attributes, properties, and qualities we have that make us who we currently are. Language has symbols that have characters of their own. They represent aspects of reality. As a character can be marked onto something, so too are we marked. Character can be applied as a way to view ourselves, the soul, quote soul, in terms of the qualities of consciousness we currently have. That's why soul is an individuation, because we're attributing it as an individuated aspect of the higher self, the Most High, the Spirit. It's an aspect of that as we individuate. So we associate ourselves from birth to death as having our own soul, because we're different from everybody else. So it's just a conceptual way of doing, of understanding ourselves in relation to other people, and also in relation to a higher self, or the higher self, because it's not individual higher selves, it's one I awareness, it's just pure awareness. That's the higher self. And it gets individuated here into physicality, that spirit consciousness goes into creating reality, all of existence, and then the physical body vehicles made of matter are either capable of expressing consciousness, aspects of the pure consciousness, pure awareness, as their own individuated awareness in physicality, but it requires physicality to develop that individuality, and therefore an identity forms from that individuality that is capable of expressing consciousness and free will, and this only applies to animals. That's why different animals do have different personalities, because they're capable of developing these personalities and identities as an expression of the all-one pure consciousness, but that is individuated into matter itself. And other realities work different way. Other entities, they may be individual personality identities, but that's the way it works from their level of existence, where we are not. We require physicality, and we're at the forefront of evolution as I see it. So they are marks of identity which define aspects of reality or ourselves. That's what characters are. We write characters about reality. So they're marks of identity. We identify with symbols. That's what symbols are for, to reflect reality. We create symbols and language in order to reflect an understanding of reality. So every mark we make about a symbol is an identity which defines aspects of reality or ourselves. When we look at moral character, that is what defines us. It's a mark on our, quote, soul, on our selves, on the individuation from birth to death that marks who we are. After death, well, you're not there anymore. You've put in your karma to the world to create the current condition as it is, and then the afterlife is, well, the pure awareness, the pure consciousness keeps reincarnating. It's all it that keeps coming, that keeps creating what is. It's at the base level. It's all that one. It's all that individuates, and the spark of the flame and the drop in the ocean or the wave in the ocean. It's a part of it, but it has form. It's distinct. It's not formless. So when you get form, then you have the ability to be an ego, personality, identity construct. Without the form in this reality, there's rocks and stuff that have form, but they don't have the complexity of the physical body vehicle in order to express consciousness and free will. This is in my understanding of the conception of God, Spirit, all one, and how it could possibly create reality. So these marks and identities are on us as we live, because you have to do things. The marks and identities are in reality to reflect reality, and the marks of our identity are a reflection of what we do. That's why it's refers to character, applies to us as well, because they're marks on us, on our persistent I-ness, which is always there, just the awareness, which is why we are the I am that I am, and we're God, because it's all the same awareness, it's all the same, but it's individuated when we are as an ego, personality, identity. We develop different personalities and identities and impositions and conditions. So we all have different character and different marks because we all do different things and we're born at different times in different places. None of us are the same. That's why we have an identity, and character defines who we are, and we can all coalesce towards the same character by doing right and not wrong. And we'll have different actions still, and we'll still be individuals, but we'll harmonize more towards a conformity to truth and morality. And that will make us more similar and more the same, even though we'll be different and still have differences and individualities and identities, but we'll be the same under the truth. And that's where you get the unity, the true unity on things that matter, which is morality. So these are qualities that are scraped or scratched onto us or objects in reality, unseen marks, like could be done with a pointed stake and engraved onto some surface such as clay, which is the original one to make an engraving. So we're like a clay. You could say man was molded from clay, and then the breath of life was breathed into our nostrils. I believe that's how the story of Adam works, or something. Or maybe it's earth, the humus, so human. So I think it's clay, and then you breathe into the nostrils, and there's the life of the man. So we're clay because we can be marked, because we are from the earth with the breath of God. So the pure awareness, the I awareness, well, that's breathed into us, and that's where we can experience awareness and consciousness. But since we are clay, metaphorically, it's all metaphors, similes, allegories to try to explain an understanding of us, but it's all symbolic metaphors. So you look at clay, it's not literal clay. Stop taking the stories as literal. So the clay is malleable. We're all malleable. An ego, personality, identity construct is malleable because it's constructed from our impositions from birth to death. And we can take charge of those impositions and conditions and change ourselves if we want. And we're malleable at any time. That's why we're chameleons and copycats. Because we just copy things when we grow up and we learn, and it becomes us through positive reinforcement or negative reinforcement. And we all develop differently because we're all in different places at different times, and we have different experiences. So it all creates an individual ego personality identity construct that's not like others, but there's similarities because we all live in the same reality, and there's similar impositions, and truth is truth and lies are lies, and we accept lies and we accept truth, and that shapes us into what we believe about ourselves, the self-image and the worldview constructs. It's all related to the same thing. So the qualities that are scraped or scratched onto us, or objects in reality, unseen marks, engraved, such as clay. So we keep engraving things on us as clay. We are clay with the breath of life. And then when we die, we go back to the earth. And then the breath of life, well, that's the pure awareness that never dies. It's in everything, conceptually, in the concept of creation. God is everywhere. God is in everything. You can look at a tree or look at a rock or look at the earth, and there's God, conceptually. Quote, God. There's the spirit, quote, spirit. There's the awareness. There's everything. There's consciousness. Consciousness is everywhere. But it's all conceptual. It's not human consciousness, because consciousness as a human, or as other animals as well, they're expressive. We can express consciousness. It's not consciousness just as a manifested physical form from the immaterial, unseen, unphysical, coalescing into material form. So it goes from the all-one, and then it goes to the quantum field of energy, since the all-one awareness, energy singularity is energy, and then it goes to the quantum field, and then it builds up from there. You have the all source one consciousness that makes itself into an energy field, then the 7 dimensions, and those would be the implicate order, the quantum field possibly, and then that becomes various levels of quantum whatever and other realms and realities, that eventually those 7 build up to create the last 4, which is time, and then the 3 of space, which is where we live in the upper part. And it's based on the lower part that built the upper part, because the lower part is the quantum stuff and other whatever dimensions of energy that create us or whatever, and who knows, just conceptual. But you have the math and whatever that can show 7 dimensions before, or 11 dimensions in total, and the 4, 3, space, 1, time, and then 7 other ones. So those 7 again, the universal laws, the 7 universal laws, etc. So 7 and 4 and 11 are important numbers. But where was I going with that? Oh yeah, expressions of consciousness. So when you go up in physicality that gets created, well, it doesn't have the expressions of consciousness. It's just physical. Everything's made of consciousness. It's all made of energy. It's all made of consciousness. It's all made of awareness, etc., etc. It's all made of spirit. It's all made of God. The concept as it goes. So in this way, only the complexity of physical vehicle bodies that are capable of expressing consciousness can do so, and can express free will, and can interact, and have thoughts, emotions, and actions, and they can move around and do what they want with their free will, and they have creative capacities to create things. And the higher you go up in complexity, you reach humans, who have the greatest capacity to create both good and evil. Other animals are more amoral. They do not have the capacity for morality, nor the creative capacity, which is the more creative capacity you have, which when you reach humans, the greatest capacity, the more capability you have of expressing morality potentially through an understanding of your higher order consciousness. So when you get to humans, higher order consciousness, who can understand morality and live right, we also have the ability to create much more evil or good. And that's why there's the responsibility we have to good, because we can create such evil because of our greater degree of consciousness expressions and free will capacity. It requires morality as a check and balance, because we don't have predators. We can do things and run out of balance, but we're the only ones who can set it right. Other animals, if they, like rabbits or other animals that overpopulate and overtake their geographical location, usually there's the predators in this quote, false balance and false harmony, just as a way to keep things in check, because they don't have higher order consciousness to regulate themselves. We are capable of self-dominion, self-mastery, and self-control. That's part of enlightenment. Other animals are lower order. They run more. They don't only have, but they run more on a basic programming of physicality, or boundaries, limits, and laws. That was boundaries, limits. Anyways, there's another word I use usually to refer to the basic programming aspect of physicality. And as you go up in complexity, you develop. When you get to animals, you have more consciousness capacities of expression of thoughts, emotions, and actions, but you still have basic programming. Just as us, we still have basic programming. And that's more the lower qualities, the lower animalistic capacities. But our animalistic capacities are worse than other animals, because we have more capacity to indulge in the lower capacities and go crazy with them and create more evil and debaucherous, degenerate ways of living than other animals do. So we have the responsibility to morality, because that's the self-checking mechanism, or else we destroy ourselves. And in lower animals, and in the programmed, limited boundaries of nature, they have some capacity to self-regulate, but they're not as conscious as us. They have consciousness, thoughts, emotions, actions, and free will, but not as much as us, so they don't have the capacity to understand as well. And as I mentioned before, some animals do break out and they become friends with things that are supposed to be their prey, and they take care of them and have fun and play along. But that's why I say nature has a false balance and harmony, because it's not really a balance and harmony of everyone getting along. It's a harmony just to make things work. You're just making it work. So just so that the lower order beings don't overpopulate and get out of control, because they run more from lower base, animalistic, carnal, fleshly programming and just aspects of survival. So they just, like rabbits, they just keep screwing and making babies and babies. So you need a predator, because it's more basic living. Whereas us, we have higher order consciousness and higher order living potentials. And that's why we have the requirement to learn about ourselves and reality and proper conducts of behavior, so that we do not kill ourselves as other lower animals would do if predators weren't there, in this false harmony and false balance of lower order nature. We have to balance and harmonize ourselves. That's the gift and the responsibility we have. We are our own predators. We create a predator-dominator psychopathic way of living, and we prey on ourselves. We are our own predators when we are imbalanced into non-self-dominion, non-sovereignty, non-self-control, non-enlightenment. We're dual. We're on the checkerboard floor, walking the path of both good and evil, living amorally, doing evil while thinking we're doing good, and doing good while we think we're doing evil, or whatever. It's all mixed up, and we're just living whatever way we're living, and we're not thinking, we're not developing ourselves, we're not developing sovereignty and thinking and self-dominion and self-control. So that's why we have to regulate ourselves as our own masters, or other people become masters and they become the predators over our lives, and it's a predatory dominator psychopathic system and hierarchy, and it's all survival domination based, which is just a mirroring of the lower order nature of survival, and domination as a self-regulating mechanism. So we self-regulate ourselves as lower order base consciousness beings because we're not developing the sovereignty, self-dominion, self-control, self-mastery, and enlightenment as a being that recognizes the importance of aligning our thoughts, emotions, and actions in themselves, but also the more important aspect of uniting it with truth, love, good, right, morality, natural law, true self, higher will, God, source, spirit, all, etc. We have to align ourselves with that in order to regulate ourselves, or else we're going to be, in the aggregate, regulating ourselves through a corrupted, predatory, dominator, psychopathic way of living which mirrors the lower order, animalistic, carnal, fleshly, beastly nature. I hope that makes sense. It's something I just came up with now. It just makes a lot of sense that we mirror lower order, and then we become predators for others, become predators for us, and other humans become predators for other humans as a self-regulating mechanism because we choose to live amorally as animals. So that's why you can look at the elites as fulfilling a lower order natural order, which isn't really order, it's just a false harmony and a false order and a false balance. But they are so much in a degenerate false self, not in the true self, higher self, in higher will of natural moral law, truth, love, good, right, morality. They have taken up the lower order, carnal, fleshly, beastly nature of amoral living in immorality, and they become the predators in a predatory, dominator, psychopathic system that somewhat mirrors the lower order nature, false natural order, false balance, and false harmony, just in order to keep things progressing in evolution of higher order complexity, so that one particular species doesn't overtake the habitat and destroy everything. That's why there is this evil in nature, because it's amoral. There is no care. It doesn't have feelings. It just, things progress, and there's a checks and balances. Because they are amoral, they are lower order, they don't have higher order capacities for self-control and self-development and improvement and betterment. That's why we are at the pinnacle of evolution right now on the planet, and that's why the four later dimensions of time and space, where we live in 4D, we don't live in 3D. 3D, as I've mentioned in other audios, would be just only space. Well, where's the movement? If you don't have time, there's no movement. There's nothing. There's nothing. Non-existence. Play a movie and press pause, and there's just space. Well, there's nothing. Nothing going on when nothing's moving. It's non-existence. When you just have space. You need time for reality to exist. So that's why we live in 4D. So I hope that makes sense. It makes a lot of sense to me what I just came up with, but it's fresh in my mind. So it is an inducted concept, but so far in my deductions on the spot, it seems to hold pretty solid. But as I say, it could be wrong. I need more. Normally, I don't just spurt things out like that without going through them, which is why I have a lot of notes and work already done, but I haven't published it because I still have to go through it a second time to make sure it's non-contradictory, because I do pride myself on logic and non-contradiction, because that's how you make sense of reality and yourself. So you have to make sure things do not contradict. But so far it seems very accurate, as it is in line with my other notes on lower order nature versus higher order nature, and how lower order nature does not care. It does not have care. It's not a thing. It doesn't have an identity. It doesn't care. It's not a consciousness. That's why there's the will of nature isn't the lower order nature. It's higher order nature. It's not, oh, the will of the green and the rocks and the planets and the universe. No, and not in that respect. There's two aspects of nature. This is why I have an infographic of conceptual levels, and in there I put all the different levels of different concepts I have. So there's reality 2 levels, truth has 2 levels, care has 4, The great work has two. Identity has two. Ignorance has two. Self-realization has two. There's mirrors has three. So I should publish that at some point. It's a constantly a work in progress. The more I realize the dual or triple or quadruple natures of concepts and the different levels of progression in that concept, well, I write them down. But anyway, so we're at the forefront of evolution, and we have to self-regulate ourselves, or we're going to be regulated through a mimicking of the lower order nature, which will put us into a predatory dominator, psychopathic, hierarchical way of living, where we just enslave others and enslave ourselves, and we work up the ladder to not only be slaves for others, but we want to have slaves working for us under us, so that we have more privileges and a more easy way of living, and it's way more exploitative than the lower order nature, and it creates a false balance and a false harmony in this psychopathic predatory dominator system of living we live in. It's not real harmony, it's not real order, it's not real balance, just like it isn't in lower order nature. It's cruel, and there's no care there. It's just boundaries, limits, and laws of survival. So the rabbits have sex and multiply and multiply and multiply. They're just following basic survival programming instincts of the basic level of their biological, physical programming, and they also have aspects of consciousness and thought, emotion, and action, and free will, coupled with that stronger, baser aspect. Whereas we have a stronger consciousness capacity and free will that can overturn our lower order, lower consciousness, carnal, beastly, fleshly, amoral, animalistic living capacities, where we don't care about morality and we just do whatever for survival, which is what other animals tend to do. But they're not as perverted and as degenerate as us in the potential for survival and doing whatever we want amorally, to do immoral things. Since we have greater capacities of consciousness and free will, we can go even deeper into the lower animalistic fleshly desires and carnal beastly nature, more so than other animals of a lower order. Because we have higher order capacities of power and creation, we can create more evil and more immorality than lower order, more basic consciousness compared to us, that cannot create as much evil as we can create. And this is the ultimate responsibility we have to truth, love, good, right, morality, natural law, true self, higher will, God, source, spirit, all. Is we have the responsibility to align ourselves with our human nature, our true nature, which is our human nature, our true nature, to become a real human being, because it's all the same thing, it's all the same model. It's not, oh, you got to become your true self, your true nature, which is, you got your own true nature and true self and higher self, and I got my own true nature and true self and higher self. No, it's all the same true nature. It's all the same higher self, true nature, human nature. It's all the same, because we're one. It's one thing. It's the one universal. See, the essence and the form and the identity comes from the species level at the universal individual level, and we're looking at Aristotle's metaphysics in this conceptual framework. So you have our essence and the form that creates our body. This is another theory. If you look at Rupert Sheldrake's material, the morphogenetic field, and this is another note I came up with last night. You have the morphogenetic field for our physical aspects and the basic biological organization of the body vehicle. So there's always a morphogenetic form for horses and cats and different species, different subspecies, that they all have the same form, even though there are variations in the form. it's all the same form. And people think that comes from genetics, but if you look at Rupert Sheldrake's material and you understand metaphysics and you understand where the form is supposed to come from the universal individual and not the particularized or the programming in the particularized aspect. And maybe there's a reflection of the morphogenetic field in the DNA programming, etc. Whatever, getting too speculative. But so the morphogenetic field is for the physical body, and you have epigenetics, and that's where our ego personality identity construct comes from. Because from birth to death, we're into an environment, and the environment, as I've explained in other audios as to where the ego personality identity construct comes from, the environment is the place where we are born at a specific time in a specific place. We have specific parents. We have specific life conditions, impositions, and conditions from society and people around us. Positive reinforcement, negative reinforcement, and these things all create unique people. That's why we're all unique. Even though we're all the same, we're all the same eye awareness. We're all the same we're all the same potential to aspire to, which is the human nature, the true nature, the true self, the higher will. That's what we have to aspire to at a basic level before we are an ego personality identity construct that is just pure awareness, that doesn't have an interaction with the world as a baby is, with just pure base programming. And then through, that's why they can't see things in reality, or at least they can't see very far. And then eyesight develops, and then they learn to differentiate. At first, everything is just everything. Everything's just one for the babies. And then there's the mother and them. They identify with the mother because the mother is there early on for them to develop an association and an attachment and identity with. And then that develops to other things, and they see things from things, separate from things. I think Ken Wilber has mentioned this a bit. I think I might have gotten this aspect of information and clarity from him in some respect. And that so the babies see everything as one, and then they differentiate. I think this is I don't remember what they're called, but they're pre-something and then post-something, post-identity and pre-identity or something. So you have the pre, which is everything's one, and then you separate and individuate, and then so that's when we become an ego personality identity construct that develops through impositions of our environment, which is unique to each one of us, which is why we all have unique ego personality identity constructs, and that's epigenetics. It's affecting us through the environment. So just like the environment can affect us in a genetic way, so it's not a purely genetic, it's an epi something else. So I just refer to as epigenetics, just like the morphogenetic field, which forms the body, and all the bodies have similar construct. Epigenetics in relation to the ego personality identity construct, because we are a reflection of our impositions, conditions, and other influences, possibly, quote, astrology and the frequencies of the planets affecting us. Maybe that's true. I don't know. There's different aspects, and that's how I view how we are created, and that's how we are chameleons and shapeshifters, because we can become anything. And all the impositions we have, well, we just copy from them. That's what babies do when they're early. That's why children copy and they imitate things, because we are copycats. We're shapeshifters. We can become anything. We are clay. So do you understand the analogy? That's why I had to go into this like 15-minute side topic again, repeating what I've repeated in other audios, but also introducing new material and understanding as I hash through all this. But the clay is malleable, just like I've been saying in other articles previous to me starting all these audios from the older articles I've done. We're clay, we're chameleons, we're shapeshifters, we're malleable. That's why I say we can reform ourselves. I've written in Truth is Love, I think, back in the beginning of 2014, how we're malleable and we can become anything. That's why the process of self-transformation and alchemy, we can remake ourselves into anything we want. Not physically, like, I'm going to become a dragon or whatever. I'm talking about the ways that count in our ego personality identity construct, which is our self-image and our worldview, our sense of self and our sense of the world. We can alter that which will reflect our thoughts, emotions, and actions and how we engage in the world. So we can always reshape ourselves, reshape our character, reshape the clay, and have different markings on the clay, different engravings, different characters, right? And we can always become different. We can better ourselves. Because we are the higher order animals that are capable of this, because we have higher degrees of consciousness expressions and free will expression versus lower order animals which have less of this capacity. Alright. Enough of a 20-minute side topic there. To continue, the engravings can also be changed as our consciousness can evolve or devolve, and we can alter. Geez, I make so many spelling mistakes. And we can alter the environment to create new things. So just as we can be, I've mentioned this before, how we are affected by reality and we affect reality. So just as much as we are conditioned by reality, we also reflect back into reality and alter the conditions. So we can alter the environment to create new things. We can change our consciousness and evolve, and we can change the environment. That's how we change reality. That's how we are co-creators of reality. Not of the universe in this pseudo-spiritual false interpretation of the double-slit experiment where human consciousness creates the collapse of the wave particle into a matter, the wave particle duality into a particle, into matter, and all that stuff. That's a flawed understanding. People don't do their homework properly. So we get to manner, and it's a kind, sort, of variety. So we get to manner, kind, sort, and variety. You can relate it back to in metaphysics in the kind, in the species level, which, as I said, is where the essence, form, and identity comes from, in the metaphysical conceptual framework. And from Old French manière, which is a fashion, method, manner, way, appearance, bearing, custom. So you can see how all this stuff all relates. That's why morality has manner and character in it. So a sort and variety. Sort and variety is moral versus immoral. You're going to act in a certain way. It's a kind of action, a variety of action versus another variety of action. From manus, so again, manner comes from manus, hand, strength, power over. Another cognate, Old English mund, a hand, protection, guardian. And then I have in square brackets, hold is also guard and protect, as I did. Hold was discussed in, I think, 2 articles on family ownership and slavery, as well as kind, kin, genus, and care. So you hold things in your hand, you have grasp over it, you protect it, guard it, and that relates to ownership and things like that. So again, bearing good and evil. It's I think it relates to that article and audio as well, where we're carrying oneself, a deportment, right? When you carry things, you carry yourself, your character. You carry your character, your manners. It's your deportment. And we have bear again. I've already went into this in other places. To bear, to bring forth, produce, to endure, sustain, give birth, carry a burden. So when you bear evil, you have to carry the burden, and until we're capable of removing evil from existence by sending it back. So go read, or well, actually, don't go read my articles. Whenever there's an audio or video, you need to listen to it, not read the article. The articles, sometimes it's 3/4, half, or a quarter of the length of the audio, because I elaborate on many more things. So more info in the from Bearing Good and Evil article. Now we come to carry, which is related to bear, from the root kers, K-E-R-S, which is to run. So running, flowing, from the Old French courant, and courir from Latin, to run, move quickly, and again from this is from current. So carry, car, current. A car moves, it runs. It's all from kers, to run. A current runs, the water current, electric current. Our currencies of time and attention. Time is related to the element water. Time, change, and action are all related. Because in time, things change in time, and it's related to action and movement. So we are the ones who can have the most capacity for action and change in the world, and that's why we are the time binders in terms of Alfred Korzybski's model, and maybe other models related to time, because our deeds, our actions, are reflected in time and change. And the currencies of time and attention, well, that's what allows us to focus on creating in the actions of good or in evil. Where does our time and attention go? Does it go on useless things, on superficial things, which keep perpetuating the current condition because we're not focusing on the knowledge of good and evil in order to create in the good? So where we're running to as a species, as individuals and a species, is based on is the currency. Where we're running is the currency. So what's our most important currencies? Well, the quote spiritual, the unseen currencies are our time and attention. The attention, the awareness, and that comes from the pure awareness, the I. And we have our ego personality identities, which are impositions and conditions of our environment so that we can live in the environment and interact. And there's aspects of falsity in it. The I awareness that always remains constant from birth to death. Well, that's where we need our time and attention to change our ego personality identities and our sense, our worldview, our understanding of the world, our understanding of ourselves, our sense of selves, our self-image, our self-concept. We can change that and run in different directions. We can use our current to change where we're going. We can use our currencies of time and attention to change where we are going. And then from manner where there was deportment, bearing, carry and bearing, carrying oneself, deportment. So you carry yourself, right? What you carry, the way you carry yourself is also related to character and the manner in which you live. So again, we see how bearing, with relation to how we carry ourselves and comportment and the manner, what we're bearing, the appearance of how we express ourselves, the way we live, the manner we live, the method we live, the fashion in which we live. Because the manner is the hand, the strength, the power over what we do. And we get to deportment is to behave. So now we get from morality, now we're getting to behavior, right? To behave from deportment. So deportment is to behave. It's how we carry ourselves. It goes back to bearing, which is why deportment wasn't bearing, to carry of oneself, carrying of oneself. So deportment from deport, which is from D, which just means from or off, and porter, to carry. D, porter, to carry off, to carry from. And then we have port, which is a going. You have a going, a passage. The ports of a boat or whatever, the port, it's a going or passage. And it's also to lead, pass over, and the cognates in Greek, poros, a journey, passage, way, and there's a pyrein, to pierce and run through. So you can see to lead, going, journey, passage, way is related to behavior and carrying off, carrying oneself, our deportment. So you can see how this all relates to our character and what's in how we mold ourselves as clay. Where are we going, the journey, and we have to use our currency, the way we carry ourselves, the bearing, deportment, in order how we behave is with our currency, where we're going, where we're running to. So the journey, passage, and way. And that's the way and path, the right way and the right path. The way and the path is part of the journey, and this is the journey and the passage of initiation, which is why crossing over doesn't mean about dying, and it's not about going to the afterlife. Your afterlife begins when your stupid ordinary life, you kill it because you're coming out of the grave, right? That's why when you're in the grave, in the coffin, in the tomb, in the darkness, because you don't have light, because you're not alive, right? You're not alive, so you're dead. You're not alive because you're not in the afterlife. You've not been reborn from being dead in the tomb of the condition into falsity of the way we live. So when you begin the journey on the spiritual path, on the way to greater attainment of truth and morality, well, that's the passage, that's the way and the path, that's going up the mountain. That's where you're initiated into the way and the path, beginning the journey. So you're crossing over from being dead in the coffin in the tomb. You've crossed over, and now you're on the spiritual journey. Now you're in the spirit. Now you're alive. That's the real life, right? The spirit is the real life. The Ankh is the key to life. And this is, anyways, in my new natural law presentation it's going to be huge. There's too much work in it. Anyways, I'm going to talk about the Ankh, and the Ankh relates to the key of life, which is, the key to the spirit and the soul. Well, that's it. This is what it's about. It's about initiation, being crossed over. It's like a cross. The Ankh is like a cross. It's a variation of the cross. It has the Tau cross, which is the letter T, and has the oval, which is Ru, and Ru is a road, a path, a way, in French, Rue, and it's Rue des Femmes, and it's feminine, and it relates to a mouth, and also the womb, the uterus, and birth and being rebirthed. And that's why when you are reborn, you're rebirthed into the way, into the passage, into the spirit, into the soul, into the aspects of leading towards the true self, higher will, the way up the mountain, the passage, the way, the journey, the path. Everything relates. Once you look at symbolism for the symbolism, and you don't buy into the stories, and you don't buy into later stories that used symbolism that wasn't understood, and then they perverted it and altered it and added things, and it gets all twisted, and then there's literal interpretations, and then the stories become true. You have to look past all the literal aspects of narratives and stories in the past, and you have to look simply at the symbols and make sense of them as a reflection of reality. You have to start from the ground up and understand things from the ground up, from reality. That's what truth is based on, is from reality. From the particulars, you can gain aspects of the universal. But you have to always come back to the ground, or else you're unfounded. So yeah, that was a side topic there, but that's going to be in my natural law work. People are not going to like what I have to say, and it shatters a lot of fantasy beliefs we have about spiritual concepts, which I refer to as pseudo-spiritual. And anyways, so the journey, passage, way all has to do, as I'm saying, the real afterlife, the real immortality is not that you're immortal. You're already immortal if you consider your secondary aspect of being, which is not an identity in itself, is the pure awareness, the I awareness. That's the same for everybody. It's just pure awareness. There is no identification with anything in reality, in material universe. It's just pure awareness, unadulterated, unconditioned awareness. That's the pure consciousness. That's why these concepts derive, because you can come to this understanding through meditation or other means, or just conceptually you can understand it. And just by understanding how we are formed, that's how I came to understand it, by how we are formed individually as individual identities. That's how I got to understand the ego personality identity construct and the conditioning and the impositions from the environment. And then what's there before that? I got to that through all of this quote spiritual understanding of the I am, of who we are. Because when you recognize you're not the body, because when you're born and until you die, you're still the same person, even though you change so many ways in how you view yourself in the world, and your body changes, everything changes, so you're not your body, you're not how you, this is the you in terms of the energy source of consciousness. There's the you as an ego personality identity construct while we live from birth to death, and then there's the us, the you that's all of us, that's the same true self, higher self, that is just the pure awareness that we can become aware of. So that's already immortal, but in terms of your identity here, you're never immortal. When you die, you die. It's just that I awareness that is you, that has an ego personality identity construct, but the I awareness is everybody. It's all the same thing. It's just the pure awareness, and it's at any level it's always just I. And then when you have an existence, instead of just being, which is just being is just pure awareness as consciousness, when you have an existence in existence, then you need an ego personality identity construct in order to interact, because you're not just the pure I, the one, the all. You're an actual individuation, and an individuation, in order to be an individuation, it needs its own ego personality identity construct, which is a reflection of our individuation in the physical reality. So we have an ego personality identity construct. Instead of remaining as part of the pure I awareness, where we're individuated, reality is created as individuated units of variability, diversity, and multiplicity in the existence reality of the universe. And as such, when greater complexity develops, greater expressions of consciousness can develop, and greater expressions of free will can develop. And then we have animals, and then we have the human being, which has the greatest capacity. So when you understand the two aspects of I, one is an identity, ego personality identity construct, and the other I is not an identity at all. It's not an identity. It's more identical. It's how we are all one and the same in that identical. Identical is I, dem, so I and id. Id is it, that one, and then idem, which is the root for identity, and identical, you have the same oneness. So that one, and then the same, which is dem, so id, dem, idem, identical, is that one is the same. So you have the different, anyways, I've mentioned this in other audios, and it'll be in the natural law thing to explain who we are. We have the identity as an ego personality identity construct that is different from everyone else because of the impositions, conditions that create an identity, right? You have an ID, an identity card, we're all different. That's one aspect of identity, level 1. And then there's the higher aspect of identity, which is not the same kind of identity at all. It's identity in terms of identical, because we're all the identical I, awareness, the pure awareness, the pure being, with no impositions, no conditioning, no knowledge, nothing. It's just pure being. It's pure awareness, pure consciousness. So that's how we're identical. That's why the one is identical. It's all one thing. It's that same one. So those are the two aspects of identity. So the reason I was talking about this was to differentiate how in immortality, yes, there's the sense of immortality of that identical I awareness, pure consciousness aspect that is immortal. Yeah, well, it exists forever. It's the basis of all creation, right, in this concept? Okay. But for us here, when we are dead in the coffin, there's no light of truth. There's no heat from the truth and justice, where we're cold, dark, blind, and dead in the coffin in the tomb. So we are revived, reborn, rebirthed, and also there's successive levels. We can be reborn continuously, which is why in my Truth is Love and other aspects of Wisdom is Right Action, I think, I talk about alchemy and how we can be reborn as a phoenix is reborn from the ashes. We destroy what our shadow aspects, and we reconstitute ourselves after disintegrating and deconstructing ourselves into ash, and then we're reborn as the phoenix. And we can do this continuously, over and over in our lives, as many times as we want, to remove what is impure, diseased, garbage, porous, putrefacted waste and toxins, and we remove that and take it out of our way of being, because we recognize it does not serve us and others and what is right, good, and true. It does not serve human nature, true self, higher self. So we recognize that, and we remake ourselves as clay. We can mark ourselves differently, and as we change, it changes our behavior. That's how we reflect ourselves. We change ourselves internally in the internal, quote, spiritual consciousness aspects of our ego personality identity as well, and then we become a reflection of that externally in our actions, and then we act differently. So we are reborn anew, rebirthed from the womb of the mother. What's the mother? Well, that's the creator, right? The feminine is the creator. It's not masculine. When you take a man and a woman, where's the creation happening? Well, it happens inside of the woman. So the feminine aspect, that's why ma'at is the highest concept, and it goes back really far in Egypt, even past all the creations of other gods and other personifications. This is an original aspect of truth and order as a reflection of the feminine, which is the creator of life. There's always the dual aspect of the masculine and feminine, even in Ma'at and even in Ra. Ra wears a feathered headdress of 7 feathers by 4 rows of 7 feathers. Again, 4 and 7, 11. They're encoding this aspect of the 11 dimensions and the 7 implicate order and the 4 explicate order of space and time, and this relates to other esoteric aspects of the 7 spiritual laws and the 4 elements, and how the 4 elements are how we create our world through our care and desire, which leads, and our thoughts, and it leads to our deeds, our actions, and the changes in time, and that's the resulting consequences in reality, and that's how we create reality. That's how the 4 elements create reality. But it's based on us. It's not the 4 elements are the basis of the water and the earth and the trees and the ground and our bodies. No. That's how people take symbolism and they make it literal because they don't understand symbolism. They don't understand how symbols were created to reflect reality, and then it all becomes literal because people don't understand what symbols are used for. They're there to reflect reality. Then it becomes a literal story because they don't understand allegorical symbolism and metaphors, which is the whole basis of the origin of narratives and story. They're not literal. So I was talking about Ra and having feminine and masculine aspects in these personifications of these gods. They're all personifications, anthropomorphizing in order to relate aspects of reality and ourselves through models we are familiar with, which are ourselves, people or other animals, which is why they started off as animals and then they became people, and they had people with animal heads and animal references, because these are just metaphorical, allegorical ways to symbolically represent aspects of reality through other aspects of reality that we are more familiar with. Because when you're dealing with abstracts and universals and concepts, you need to relate it back down to the ground, to actual symbols in reality, to the particulars. So that's how we understand greater universals. People need to understand symbolism and understand story narratives and how they don't reflect literal reality. They are symbolic narratives, allegories. And this goes back way into history. This is the start of understanding reality is through a mythopoeic narrative. So, Ma'at, it's the feminine principle, but it has the masculine and feminine aspects. But it's the feminine, it's the overarching principle. And that's why it's truth, order, and justice is Ma'at, which is going to be a big part of the natural law presentation I'll be doing. I'm trying to go to the source of the conceptions of natural moral law and the conceptions of karma and how it's falsely represented, how karma is falsely interpreted. Because everyone thinks these concepts are literal, because the concepts that became literal were derived from concepts and allegories and metaphors which were not literal at an ancient time, where symbols were used with understanding with what symbols were for, and then later people forget, oh, well, the symbols, they don't represent literal reality. It's not a literal history. It's a story and narrative using symbols to allegorically and metaphorically and parabolically, Jesus and his parables, it's to make reference to concepts and higher order understanding based on the particulars of reality that we can understand through symbols of a direct reference with reality. So it's people really don't understand how symbols work. So that's why the karma and the reincarnation. No, it's a false understanding where you think that you live on forever, but you don't. It's the I awareness, the pure awareness, the just being. Well, we're all the same. It's all the being is all the same. It's all the sourced from the larger being. It's just a water drop or a spark, symbolically referencing it. It's not literally that. It's just another symbolic reference to try to help us understand this concept. So we're not reincarnating ourselves. It's all the one is always reincarnating, always and always and always. It's recycling itself, you could say, if you want to look at it that way. So, but in another aspect, when we look at ourselves here from our birth to death and how we can remake ourselves, yes, we can be reborn. We can get into the afterlife, which is after being dead in the tomb, in the coffin, you get reborn in the womb of the mother, the womb of the feminine, which ma'at, in the sky, in the air, and nut, the sky, and that's where Ra was born every morning. The sun was born from Nut, the sky goddess. She was at the top, and at the bottom was Geb, who's the earth god. That's why the feminine is air and the masculine is earth. People have it wrong. They think that air is a male element. No, it's feminine. And they think earth is a female. No, they think earth is a feminine. No, it's masculine. I gotta make a distinction between female and male. We're not talking about people. It's personifications of concepts, just like masculine and feminine aspects of consciousness. It's not male and female. These are personifications based on a predominant nature of men in the biological boundary limits and laws and how we instinctually operate versus women. So we have these masculine and feminine qualities and characteristics, but they exist in all of us because the masculine and feminine are in all. Just like the masculine and feminine is in Ra, and it's in Ma'at, and it's in Thoth, and it's in everybody. It's just the personifications. That's why the gods are a mixture of different characteristics and personifications, and that's why they share capacities in common, because it's just ways to try to blend things and concepts and ideas together, and it can be confusing. Like, I haven't gone through it all, and I don't plan to. I'm just looking at some basic things related to morality and trying to understand that originally in symbols. So when you're reborn, you're rebirthed from the womb of, we could say, Nut or Ma'at, which is representative of the sky and the air. And what's in the sky and the air? Well, you have the sun and the stars, which are representative of truth, the concentrated ingots of wisdom or knowledge that is truth and the most important. And then you have wisdom as representative of mountaintops and the capstone of the pyramid, which is the closest to the stars we get, and to the sky, to the heavens, etc. So it's born from the heavens, birthed from the heavens. The sun is birthed from the heavens, and so that's the light and the heat, truth and justice and order. And when you lack that, you're in the coffin because you're living on the checkerboard floor, dead, asleep, blind, and you can be reborn from that state. We can awaken from the coffin in the tomb, off of the checkerboard floor, on the ladder, right? The ladder has rungs. That's why if you look at the truth, natural law, heaven and hell Bible symbolism that I did last year, you can see how this all relates. That's where I started on this information. And I have Ma'at in there and the rungs and how we're rebirthed from the womb, and we go up the grades, degrees, levels, ladders, rebirths and reawakenings. There's several initiations. We can keep initiating ourselves from that initial initiation onto the journey and passage and way. That's why the Passover here, you have, this is all from the etymology here. I haven't even gotten into my explanation yet, but from deportment, the Passover. That's why I said crossover. Crossover, the cross, the cross in Christianity, all that. It's not about the afterlife and passing over and crossing over into another thing, which is, how the carrying, your soul is carried away. You're going into a passage, a port, another port for your soul or whatever. There's different symbolism, the journey, passage, and way. It's a Passover, crossing over. It's not a literal crossing over into an afterlife or into heaven, into another place where you got 40 virgins and all this bullshit. Anyways, I see things pretty clearly in terms of human fallibility and attachment to beliefs versus concrete aspects that relate to our existence here, where we actually exist and operate, versus our conceptions of our awareness of the pure being, of the pure consciousness, which is who we all are, which is all the same thing. And then we have our individuation, which becomes our separate selves, and we have to work back to that oneness, that recognition that we are all being, we are all consciousness, we are all awareness, and the will of that higher being with a capital B, the transcendental being, the will of the true self, the higher will, the will of God, the Most High, the Spirit's will, the will of the Spirit, the will of the Creator, the will of creation, etc., 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 etc. Well, that is natural moral law, morality. And we have to align ourselves to become one under truth, to become one under truth, love, good, right, morality, to become one under the true self. So we can disintegrate aspects of our false ego personality identity construct, and we'll become more uniform, of course. We'll become more one, and because we're going to conform to the truth, which is one and singular. So of course, by all of us going towards that one aspect of being, the transcendental being, of course we're going to become more similar, we're going to become more the same, we're going to become more one, but we're always going to retain individuality and identity as ego personality identity constructs, because that's where we are, that's where we live, that's our existence. And when people get born, well then there's another being, a lower being, that can help to create the karma, to create the actions, the causes and effect in reality. And then when they die, well, the next incarnations, the recycling of the pure awareness, will whether it's whether it can act or not, whether it's stars, things coalescing into rocks and whatever, whether it's a higher complexity being that's actually born, that can actually express consciousness and thoughts, emotions, and actions and free will to change the world and make things better and live more harmoniously with truth, love, good, right, morality, natural moral law. Well, so that's the true oneness, and that's the true immortality, because we're becoming more aspects of what we are supposed to become, which is our human nature, our true self, the higher self, in alignment with the higher will. And that's where the afterlife is, because we're being reborn. And then, as I said, each level, each rung, each grade we go up and disintegrate and become better and more aligned with the true self, the true nature. And it's success. There's the first afterlife and the first initiation from the tomb. And as long as you keep going on the journey, keep going on the passage, and don't tent pitch, don't become stagnant and get off the journey and stop learning and stop going into more depths of morality, go as deep as you can to the moral baseline, and for higher and more actualization in morality and truth, love, good, right, morality. Well, there's different levels, different awakenings, different rebirths, which is different afterlives, which is different immortality, different levels of immortality, different levels of the afterlife. So you have some people who recognize that taxes are bad, or government's bad, or whatever. So different levels of awakening into morality. And then you can have higher levels of awakening into morality, and higher levels of initiation, and higher levels of awareness and consciousness. And the more you gain an understanding of reality, the more conscious awareness you have of reality, the more your consciousness evolving consciousness, and that's always in alignment with truth. And there's the first truth, level 1 of reality as it is, in both its beauty and horror, good and evil, light and dark. And then there's truth level 2, which is truth, love, good, right, morality, which is the way we ought to live. And as we successively go up in our rungs, levels, degrees, in initiations and rebirths from the womb of the mother goddess, which is representative of Ma'at, truth, order, and justice, we have more truth, more order, and more justice within us to express into the world to set things right. So that's the real crossover, that's the real Passover, passing over, crossing over from being dead in the tomb That's the journey and the passage, the way, the beginning of jumping onto the journey, the passage, and the way. And this I've talked about even in December 2013 when I started my website about solipsism and the journey. When you're unbegun. And then I've talked about it in Truth, in the first article I've ever written on Truth, on the journey and beginning, initiation, and then solipsism was about the reverse and how you don't begin and you're unbegun, uninitiated. And this is based on Mark Passio's info that I've developed upon. And so I've been talking about this in minor ways, and I've been developing on it, gaining more conscious awareness of reality and understanding of reality in myself and the true nature. And I've been able to develop upon this concept and many other aspects that correspond. So that's the real afterlife, immortality, and reincarnation. I've just given you a summary of what I'll be talking about in Natural Moral Law. Presentation to come in, I don't know, a month, or a lot of work to do there. So, alright, let's get back to the article, and I'm going to actually finish it. Here's my explanation of manner, bearing, carry, and deportment. Manner is action and behavior, the kind of, sort of, variety of action. Actions, fashion, actions imbue a method, a manner, a way of doing. Your actions represent who you are, your true appearance to others. That's why judge them, ye shall know them by their actions. You shall know them by their actions. Actions speak louder than words. So the appearance, what you project as what you do, so that's what people see, right? What they see from you, the appearance, not the external appearance, the real appearance of the substance of your inner being, brought forth as an appearance through your actions and behaviors in the world. That's your true appearance to others, is your actions, not the facade of how you talk and how you express yourself and how you pretend to be. You know, everyone pretends to be good and moral. Well, it's all a facade. It's all an appearance because they don't have the substance of truth, love, good, right, morality, aspects of the transcendental being. They're the false selves living in false realities. We all live in an unreality. That's why everything's an illusion. That's the real Maya in Buddhism. It's not that the world is an illusion. It's that the world we've created through human constructs is an illusion. It's all bullshit that keeps us in false living as a false self. So what you carry on oneself, what you bear by default, without any actual object, is your character, your actions. So you don't need to carry a backpack, carry a rock or whatever. By default, what you carry is your actions. That's what's in your hand, right? And we look at manner, coming from your hand, strength and power, what you carry and bear, naturally, is your actions. You bear yourself, and yourself is represented by your actions. That's what you ultimately bear. We have to bear the evil that's done to us and send it back. And we have to bear the evil in the world in order to feel it in compassion, empathy, and sympathy, and work towards sending it back so that we can eradicate it from existence and create the true heaven and not hell. And that'll be the real culmination of our reawakening and rebirthing, initiations and afterlife and immortality, that we'll be living in heaven. So we'll be in that immortal state, not in terms of the I awareness where it's not us, but in the physicality. As each one gets born, they'll be born into the heaven, because that's the previous karma of the pure I awareness, the true self that has been created before by previous individuations of ego, personality, identity constructs that have worked on themselves, that have aligned with the true nature, human nature, true self, higher self, and the higher will, and they have created a heaven on earth instead of a hell. That's all based on our actions, our character, our manner, our customs, our way of behaving. So the actual objects is our actions, and that's how it represents us. As an ego, personality, identity construct, we have to do things to create the world we want to create, so that we create a heaven on earth, and we stop creating evil and living in hell. And so what you carry on oneself, what you bear by default without any actual object, is your character, your actions. This is also known as our behavior, which is why manner, what was it? Deportment. Deportment had behave. So again, you can see how beautiful etymology is once you can let go of your attachments to certain concepts and look at words, the symbols, as they actually reflect reality. Because we're living in reality. We're not living as a pure awareness. Okay, we're individuated aspects that develop ego, personality, identity constructs in order to interact with existence in reality of the universe. So we're not just the pure awareness. We're not the all one. We're not over there in that transcendental being state in just the one. Well, clearly we're not one. I'm me and you're you. We're living in individuations in here in reality. Although the core of the energy source that allows us to have awareness and consciousness is just that pure awareness, the pure consciousness, with no interaction with anything that exists. It's just pure being, pure awareness. So, to continue, manner also relates to hand. As I mentioned, your hands, your actions, that's what you bear, you create with. And what the hand can do, such as create, protect, and guard, but also possess and own through active control. So that's why, and you'll see in the, so the X and the cross is based on, if you take the cross apart, it's an 11, 1 and 1, which is causality, cause and effect, a 1-to-1 ratio. It's also the 11 of the 11 dimensions. And that comes from the Ka, which is the source for the letter A, and it leads to the letter T. The A and the T is the Alpha and the Omega, the Aleph and the Tau. It's the beginning and the end. And this all dates back to the source of symbols in Egypt. And the Ka is arms and hands, and that represents your deeds, your actions, which is the real spirit, the spirit of good or the spirit of evil. Spirit has everything to do with morality. So stop thinking of spirit as whatever pseudo-spiritual beliefs you want to believe in that make you feel good about yourself. Spirit has everything to do with morality. Any other aspect of spirit and going to another dimension, well, that doesn't matter, because you're not there, you're here. If you want to get there, well, maybe it relates to, if anything, it relates to morality. Morality is the most important thing. I've been talking about this for a long time. Any other beliefs you want to have about spirituality, I don't give a shit about at all. Zero importance to me whatsoever. I'll always say that, because it doesn't matter to me. I live here. I don't live in some other place, in some other dimension where other entities live and whatever the hell they're doing. We are at the forefront of evolution. All the evil that might exist in other dimensions is we need to fix that here. As I see it, we're at the forefront of the evolution of what greater complexity comes in our own 4 dimensions of living. We're at the forefront of that, but also the 4 dimensions are at the forefront of even the lower 7 dimensions. So the 4 dimensions are a result of the 7 dimensions, and we are a result of our 4-dimensional reality, and we're at the forefront of it all. So the lower dimensions, we might have entities that are evil. Well, it's all, we're at the pinnacle, and we have to fix things. And I think it's going to relate and reverberate back down or some way, somehow. But this is all conceptual and really, really speculative. I've never made contact with any entity. I'm just going off of the information in the world of other people and how they channel entities that pretend to be magnificent. No, what is it? Beneficent. There's malefice. I forget. They pretend to be good, and there's other entities. Most of them are evil. They're all corrupted. That's why they're there. When you get to our position, you can create an evil, but you can create an good. I don't really view any of the entities as being good. I view them all as corrupted. We are the ones that have an opportunity to uncorrupt and do things right. Anyways, that's all speculative, and who cares anyways. The point is morality. That's the most important thing. Truth level 2 is truth, love, good, right, morality, natural, moral law. The most important thing, you want to create a heaven? Morality. wanna get into the afterlife while you're here? Morality. You wanna be immortal while you're here? Morality. It's all morality. That's what spirit is. If you go back into the ancient sources, and Ka, and how that related to our deeds, and that was the source of the letter A, which led to the letter T, and that's the beginning and the end. Well, the beginning and the end, the Alpha and the Omega, the Aleph and the Tav, is morality. It's our deeds, the spirit of good or the spirit of evil. Which one are you going to choose? That's your spirit. That's your soul. That's who you become. That's a reflection of you. That's your marking on your character. The engravings on your soul, on your spirit, is done by your actions and deeds. Are you choosing the spirit of good or are you choosing the spirit of evil? So character has to do with the particular aspects of our being as we currently are, that are scratched and scraped onto us now that we continue to be, and manner has to do with the action or behavior that results from that condition of being. So you can see our condition of being, who we're choosing to be right now, is reflective not of the pure being awareness, but it's who we are right now, the being. So since the pure being is also the quote spirit, the transcendental being, we're supposed to be a reflection of that. So when our behaviors reflect that being, well then we're more in alignment with that bigger B being as a small b being. But when we go against that in our actions and behaviors in the spirit of evil, well then that's the result of our conditioned being, and our lower being is degenerating away from that transcendental higher being. The actions and behaviors are what we carry, what we give birth to from consciousness. Right? You understand? The internal capacities of consciousness are internal, unseen, and they're, quote, spiritual, our thoughts and emotions. And this gives birth to our actions, right? So the actions and behaviors are what we carry, what we give birth to from our consciousness, from our, quote, soul, from our, quote, spirit, from the consciousness, which is an individuation, a particularized aspect of that source energy force of the pure awareness, pure consciousness, pure being. We're an individuation of that, and we can alter away from that pure aspect, or we can go more towards it. So the actions and behaviors are what we carry, what we give birth to from consciousness, as what we represent on our journey and way. Because you had birth was bearing, burden. And you look at care, care and gar, genus, generation, what we generate. Gene is birth, to give birth, and beget relates to bearing. You give birth, carry a burden. So what we give birth to from our consciousness is the actions and behaviors that we carry ourselves, as what we represent on our journey and way. Because when you, again, when you give birth, it's going through a port, right? Bearing, deportment, you're going through a port, and you're giving birth. From the birth canal, a canal again, you go through a canal and you make port at a docking, whatever, in naval, aqua, whatever, the boats and ships and all that. I'm losing words. I'm not able to find the word to use properly. But so the journey and the passage, and you go on a port, and anyway, and then you deport from the port and you go on the journey again. And anyways, there's other aspects you can relate to that. Have fun with that. Etymology is fun. I'm just going off sidetrack with other inductions, and it's just it's too chaotic. Doing these audios, I'm all over the place because all these corresponding aspects that relate to providing additional understanding. Well, they come in, and I'm trying to explain them. So you can see how port and journey and way and a passage and the birth canal and the womb and being birthed through the womb and our initiation on the journey and the way, it all relates. All relates. So the actions and behaviors are what we carry, what we give birth to from consciousness, as what we represent on our journey and way, the passage through existence, the passage through um, the feminine womb. When we get reborn and rebirthed existence, we get born into a new existence, right? We're more alive. That's why when you're born, when you get rebirthed, reawakened, resurrected, and initiated onto the journey, path, and way, well, you're alive for once, because you were dead. Now you're alive, and that's why the Ankh and the key to life and the key to the life of the spirit and the soul. Well, that's the afterlife and immortality, because that's after when you're really alive, because before you were dead, now you're really alive. So you see how the symbolism all works, and it works on a dual layer. You can take immortality and reincarnation and afterlife, well, not reincarnation, but immortality and afterlife in terms of that pure awareness and how it recycles and all that. Yes, okay. But you can look at it in the symbolic aspect relating to our own lives in this alchemical process of self-perfection and purification in alignment with our true nature, higher self, true self, etc. So it's a passage through existence. We're getting into the real existence of being really alive. That's why there's all these allegories of, oh, this isn't our real life. Our real life is the spiritual life in the afterlife where we're immortal. Well, this is all belief in people's heads, as far as I am concerned, going from the particulars of reality and inducing universal generals and deducing back to reality, and through the symbols that originally created these concepts. The symbols represent things in reality and us in reality, and they don't represent these fantastical imagination beliefs and concepts that people want to desperately believe in, because it gives them a sense of security and comfort and removes the doubt and insecurity and discomfort from the fear of death and the unknown. When you don't have something known and you don't know what's next, you'll have a fear, you'll have doubt, insecurity, uncertainty, and it's uncomfortable. So how do you remove that discomfort, the insecurity, the doubt, the hole that you have that you fear, the darkness that you fear? Well, you provide an answer and you get attached to it, and then you believe it because it makes you feel good, because it removed that nagging, doubting question, and you have an answer. So you want to hold on to that answer. I've explained this a bit in my recent article on symbols, reality, knowledge, belief, and attachment. And so you have to be very careful on the beliefs. Everything that everyone says has an influence upon you. Words are symbols. They invoke images in your mind, like a spell being cast, which a summoning spell, it summons and invokes images. Words do that. They invoke images, they summon images in your mind, and then you can become attached to those images because you relate them to your own self-image and the worldview image, the sense of self and the sense of the world, how we view it. It's all an image and an appearance. That's why images in our mind are very important. Words and symbols that go into our mind that we are influenced with, even if we don't even know it, you're going to get mind controlled. You're going to get influenced, right? You're going to get conditioned by those words of any book you read, anything anyone says, if you do not have the fortitude in order to distinguish between objective verifiables in reality that you can actually confirm and speculative possibilities that might be possible, conceptual possibilities. You have to distinguish between the two, or else when you are influenced by words and symbols, there is a high degree of probability that it will simply become a conditioned influence, whereby the imprint of those invoked and summoned images will create an imprint upon you, just like an engraving of the character, right? The images, you can graven images. You think of the Bible, oh, the idol worship and the graven image. Yeah, well, the graven image is a character, and that can be done upon you, upon your character, your manner, your quote spirit and soul, the clayness, the malleability of who you are. You can be imprinted with images from words that are either written or spoken to you, and it can alter who you become. This is how powerful language is. This is the real magic of the world. This is what I was getting at in my Language and Reality Part 3 on occulting and encrypting reality through word magic. This is the real magic. Forget about all the movies and books and hocus pocus stuff you read. I'm not saying that's not possible. As far as I know, it's not existing. I haven't witnessed it. Is it possible? Sure. Is it probable? It might even be probable. Is it an actual thing for me? No. So what I'm talking about, the real magic, is the real source. Is why do you think all these These allegorical, symbolic, metaphor parables are talking about sorcery through words and casting spells and marking images and symbols on the ground, you know? It's all allegorical. You don't even understand that they're talking symbolically about the power of language itself, the power of symbols and images and how they affect us. It's amazing. But people don't see this. We're ignorant of the power of language and symbols and the images that they invoke in us, that they're summoned in us as spells cast on our consciousness. It's powerful, powerful stuff. This is the real magic of the world. So, well, I had one. I'm just going to reread the last two sentences. I think I read one of them and I had one left on this paragraph. So, behavior, action, the culmination of the trinity of consciousness from thought and emotion is what we run through and pierce reality with. Right? Because we had run through and pierce. The root of port in was per, to lead and pass over, as I've already explained what passover and crossover means in the port, the birth canal, etc. I hope these connections are really making sense to you, because it's powerful stuff. You'll really understand reality once you understand words, which are the reflection of reality. That's why stupid people on Facebook telling me, when I post something about family ownership and slavery, or the origin of the word family, which the word family itself, but before that you had kin and kind, and that was the understanding of family, but the word family itself, as it came to be, was related to ownership and slavery. But people, they don't want to accept the origin of words, and they're like, what's your point? You just look at nature, and is there slavery in nature? Well, yeah, I just demonstrated in this article how nature isn't caring and isn't considerate. It looks to just, to harmonize in a false harmony and a false balance in order to provide a false order, so that the lower order beings don't go out of control because they're not able to control themselves. Now, we're not at that level, so people don't like to look at the truth of symbolism. So the port and the piercing through, in reality, we're piercing and running through reality because of our actions and behaviors through the culmination of the trinity of consciousness from our thoughts and emotions. And we had run from carry, curs. So we have deportment from port, portu, and per, P-E-R, to lead and pass over. But we have the cognate in Greek of poros, journey, passage, and way. And we have perein, which is to pierce and run through. Well, again, all this rebirth, when you're rebirthing, you're piercing the vagina and you're coming into the world. When you're being reborn from the coffin, you're piercing through the earth and you're coming into the light of the sun. And you'll see that in the symbolism of the real four elements, as I will describe them, as a reflection of reality in that natural law presentation that I'm working on. It's really amazing shit. It's like, wow. The work I'm doing right now is really connects a lot of stuff. And these past few audios I'm doing, the past 4, 5, 6 audios I'm doing, are related to morality and the importance of morality, and that's the real life. That's being alive. When you're alive is because you're on the journey and the path and the passage, and you're being reborn continuously. You're remaking yourself in alignment with morality and truth. Truth, love, good, right, morality, natural moral law, the higher self, true self, higher will, etc. Our true nature, human nature. Okay, so I'll read the list. Wow, this has taken a long, long time, but I like this audio. I've delved into a lot of things to provide correspondences on how things really work. So the last sentence on this one paragraph, I'm only like 2/3 through the article or halfway. Oh boy. Anyways, so it is how we make our mark to change things for the better or for the worst. So mark, where did we have mark? Mark anywhere? Yes, character. There you go. An engraved mark. That's how we make our mark. We make our mark on ourselves, and we make the mark on reality, because the characters are a reflection of reality, and that's why we create characters and symbols and images. They reflect reality, and that's the power of symbols and images. They can make a mark on us, And we, through the power of our actions, can make a mark on reality and change things for the better or for the worse as we run through and pierce through the different layers, and also as we run through reality and pierce reality and change reality. You're going to break through it and change it. The way and the path, the journey, can have power over you if you don't walk in the right way, which is why there's the spirit of good and there's the spirit of evil. That's why you have two hands, two arms, symbolically representative of the right way and the wrong way. Again, if you look at other work I've done, natural law, causal agents, hamster wheel, perpetuating the cycle, truth, natural law, heaven and hell, Bible symbolism, there's the right hand of God and there's the left hand of God, symbolically. The right hand is how we create for ourselves in the right way, and the left hand is how we create for ourselves in the wrong way. That's why you have Ka, which, as I said, was representative of the spirit of good and evil through our actions and deeds that change and through time in reality. And that's why the two hands, and they become just the two lines, and there's 11, and there's duality, the duality of good and evil, and those two lines cross, the Passover, the crossover, and you could say they, well, not a true uniting, but a uniting of the knowledge of good and evil crosses over, passes over, and that's what begins your initiation, where you start to recognize evil in the world. That's what it's all about. Is you can go back to other audios. Go listen to the past 6 audios. There's a lot of information that's all interrelated, and how we, I think, bearing good and evil, and how we, wait a second. So that's why we have the crossover, the Passover, being rebirthed. Well, it has to do with crossing over, and it has to do with the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, and having to know both good and evil in order to live in the good. Because if you're not knowledge of the evil, then you're going to live in the possibility of movies like The Giver and animes like Psychopaths, where you think the good is good, but it's actually evil. So you see evil as good, and you see falsity as truth, and you see wrong as right, and you're not doing it right. So you need to cross over knowledge of good and evil and not live in a dualistic mode on the checkerboard floor. You need to come out of the coffin and onto the rungs of the ladder to reawakening into several births and rebirths. And so we have the left and right hand symbolism, and you got to choose the right path. And then to get to the right path, another way is you got to cross over. You got to cross over the two knowledges, not the actual actions of choosing one path or the other, not to merge the paths and do both. That's false balance, false harmony, falsity, creating more stupidity. If you cross over the knowledge, that's where the tree of knowledge of good and evil. It's not good or evil, it's and. You need to know the knowledge of both so that you can actually create in the alignment of one path or the other. You need to cross over the knowledge so that you can choose accurately and walk properly on one path. The right path and not the wrong path. The right hand and not the left hand path. So the way can have power over you if you don't walk in the right way. You can be actually walking the false way, and you don't know it. It can have power over you. You think it's the right way, and you keep doing it as the right way. That's what all society does. We all keep living in the hamster wheel, going round and round, keep perpetuating the same condition because we're blind to evil. We don't have the knowledge of good and evil. We don't have the tree of knowledge of good and evil. Custom and tradition are the negative ways of unthinking acceptance of social familiarity and are the falsity of the wrong way for the most part. Customs and traditions, that's customs, tradition, and culture are all the same thing in that they are an adherence to a collective way of living, not the collective under truth, love, good, right, morality, and natural law. That's the right kind of collectivism. The wrong kind of collectivism is impositions into falsity. Because why? Because you're a blind, stupid, dead in the coffin moron who doesn't see the light of truth, and you think that you're living in truth, but you're living in falsity. You think you're living in good, but you're living in evil. You think you're living in right, but you're living in wrong. So what's that? If you go back to my family ownership and slavery, Well, what's that? Oh, the negative ways of unthinking, where you're in the tomb, you're blind, you don't have the light of truth, you're blind to it. You're in the darkness. You're darkness and wandering blind on the checkerboard floor, doing both good and evil, good and evil. You haven't reached the rung because you haven't crossed over into the Passover of being reborn and rebirthed into being really alive, into the stages of immorality and into the afterlife, where you're really alive, the true life of the spirit and the soul, the key to life, the Ankh. Anyways, that'll come later. So, unthinking acceptance of social familiarity. The family, ownership, and slavery. The original word family. I'm not talking about the original concept for what we now view as family. The original concept was related to kind and kin and genus and care. Go look at my audio on that to understand that more. That's the word family, though, the familiarity. Well, you can tie it into my understanding of the etymology for family as slavery. So the customs, traditions, culture, the negative ways of unthinking acceptance of social familiarity. The social familiarity is the social ownership and social enslavement, while we're all servants to the social order, servants to social conformity in that this false family, this false familiarity. It's all false. And so customs and tradition are the negative ways of unthinking acceptance of social familiarity and are the falsity of the wrong way for the most part. Now we get into behavior. Yeah, sorry about that. We're only halfway through. Jesus. Well, this is a great little article. It allowed me to expand on many, many things. So if you want to read it, anyways, too late now, but I was going to say if you want to read it first, then come listen to my audio. Maybe that's what I should say in the future. Read the article, then listen to my audio, and you'll get a lot more information. So behavior, havor, possession, right? Look at the word. Havor, have. Something you grasp and hold. Possession, ownership. So if you look at the article on family ownership and slavery, as well as bearing good and evil, and there might be a one before that. I think there is. Relating to hold. I can't remember, but I think there is. There might be a third one. So I have a word altered. Anyways, I have a link here to have, which is in my well, it's the link to the word for the Etymology site for the word have. So you can see havor, possession, right? You hold in your hand. Again, the hands, the man, manual, manner, possession, ownership, things in your hand that you grasp. Then there's if you look at the other work I've done, there's the right kind of ownership of things you are actually allowed to grasp, which relate to you. And there's the false ownership, the delusion of might makes right, where we could grasp women because we were stronger, might makes right. So that was, oh, that was right, we can do whatever we want. We can do whatever we want to women and children and other animals in the world. And it's just a whole psychopathic dominator, predator. Just, we're stupid. It's because we're living from an amoral, animalistic, carnal, fleshly, beastly, where we can do whatever we want because we can do it. So we're driven by pleasure instead of pain. So what's pleasurable? Well, let's have sex all the time and take drugs and all these things that keep us lost and confused because we don't know who we are, and we still stay dead and blind and dumb in the darkness. And the things we can possess, we're not taking possession of, which is our own behavior. And we're supposed to make it in alignment with truth, love, good, right, morality, natural law, the right things, because we're focused on our pleasure and gratification. And that's why people engage in violence, because to have power over another provides you with a sense of, it provides you with a sensation. It's a feel-good sensation to have control and domination over another, in a basic animalistic aspect of our lower order current consciousness as humans. A lot of people gain power. A lot of people do violence because they don't have, I guess they feel powerless in the way of living we live in, and the falsity of the way of living, or whatever, in the lack of control they have over life or maybe death. So they take control over others, and it gives them a sense of power. It makes them feel good, and this is the bad kind of possession. And so we take power over women and do whatever we want. So rape women and have sex. Well, that feels good. Might makes right. I had power over them. I took control of their lives and dominated them. So yeah, that made me feel good in the first place. And then I raped them, so my penis feels good, and that makes me feel good. So yeah, just might makes right is the right way to live, right? Right male dominator bullshit. Predatory psychopathic domination, the world we live in for thousands of years, because we don't want to evolve. We don't want to independently seek an understanding of truth and morality and align with it. We're too conformist to accepting the way we already live is the right way, and that we're not being lied to, so we just keep believing in lies. So have, in sense of have or bear oneself in a particular way, which is the etymology for behave. So from behavior, have or possession, and then we have behave is to have or bear oneself in a particular way. Is exactly what I've been describing when we were talking about manner, bearing, carry, and deportment. It's how you carry yourself, your deportment. So where are you going? Are you birthing through evil, or are you birthing through good? Or what port are you leaving from? You can look at it in that way, maybe, the deportment. Just another induction I just had there. It might be total bullshit, but just another possible creative way of looking at it there. Don't take my word for it. Do your own thinking. Create your own connections. So to have or bear oneself in a particular way, because again, what you carry, naturally, apart from anything else, is your own actions. That's what you carry into the world. So to have or bear, again, behavior. What's your behavior? What's your actions? See how all the etymology relates? It's beautiful. I'm just talking pure etymology. Like I said in my other audio, I don't like the really tenuous and stretched and really like hard to see the connections work that other people do in etymology and so-called green language, that they stretch and the connections are tenuous and it's iffy, their conclusion. I don't view that as grounded in reality. It's too stretched up in imagination and possibilities. I like to ground things more in ways that can be really expressed through more clear understanding. I'm not invalidating their work. I'm just saying it's more speculative versus going actually through the words themselves and the symbols they reflect in reality and the images they invoke naturally through a reflection of reality and through our own understanding of how we work and how things work in reality. That's where the origin of symbols are supposed to come from. So we have or to own and possess, be subject to experience, and that's from Proto-Indo-European cap, to grasp. And then I have a link to capable from Etym Online. And again, grasping and ownership, that's in family ownership and slavery. You can look at that there for additional elaboration, I think. Then we have be. Be have, so I just said have, and what's be? Well, be is a word-forming element with a wide range of meaning. It can be thoroughly, completely, or to make, cause, seem, or to provide with, at, on, to, for. And we can also look as be, as in being. So whatever you have, your behavior, whatever you have in terms of your actions, what you possess, as you're bearing yourself in a particular way, what you own, what you truly own. You can have other things and grasp and grab a rock and say you own that, but it's just something you grasp, and then when you die, well, you won't be grasping it. The only thing you really own, what you really bear and carry, are your actions. That's the real ownership, self-ownership. The real ownership is owning up to yourself and the personal responsibility to live in the right way in the path on the journey, to become more actualized as aspects of the transcendental being, more actualized in aspects, self-realized in aspects of truth, love, good, right, morality. So that becomes who we are, our being, right? As we looked at before, being and the big being and the small being, and I've talked about it in previous audios closely adjacent to this one, and 2, 3 back, or 1 and 2 of the previous audios. So the being can be looked at as that as well. What we have and what we possess, our actions, our behaviors, is who we become, who we be. So behave, be have, the have that we be. What we have in our possessions is who we be. So you can break it down that way, as opposed to this etymon line be, which is, I find, I don't know, a little limited. But you can look at it in this way as well, as to have authority, to have completely, to have and to make, to have as to cause. So you can look at it that way, to have completely, thoroughly. Well, the only thing you have completely and thoroughly are your own actions, as I was saying. The only thing you own, really, are your actions. That's what you own up to. That's what your represent of yourself is, your appearance in the world. That's your character, that's your manner, that's your deportment, that's everything, is what you thoroughly and completely have, which are your own actions as a result of your own consciousness, is the only thing you have. That's self-ownership. To become a sovereign, self-actualized, in self-dominion, in non-contradiction, and in alignment with truth, love, good, right, morality as much as you can in progressive degrees, or in evil instead of good, and that's what you have. You have thoroughly, and you completely have, and what you make and cause to have is evil, because that's what you're acting in, that's your behaviors and actions. And here I have own and possess from the Proto-Indo-European aik, A-I-K, to be master of. And from the Old English, agan, so aik, A-I-K, or ak, well, that's egg, because K can be a G. So egg, ag, and agan, have. And that's the Old English, to have. So to possess, master of, to have in your hands. So you can be, as I mentioned before, the master of rightful things and the master of wrong things. You can be the master of yourself, what you rightly have a position, the right to master and take hold of and have ownership of, which is yourself, self-ownership, self-governance. That's what you have. And then there's the word possess. To have and hold, possess, be master of. So we're talking about the same thing. And that comes from potis, which is able and powerful, plus the end esse, which is to be. So again, potis and esse, or s, possess, potis s, possess, is to be able and to be powerful. So when you can possess things, and you can have domination and power over other beings, and dominate them and inflict harm and do whatever you want to gain whatever lower base carnal fleshly desires you want to gain from it, and create evil into the world and immorality, and create a hell, and that's your karma you're creating. The conditions you're perpetuating into the world is cause and effect, and then those that are born after you through the reincarnation cycle of the pure awareness, the pure being, the transcendental being as an individuation, creates a new ego personality identity through the impositions of the environment and the conditions, which are a result of the previous conditions that other people have created as their own ego personality identity construct, as alignment or disalignment from the true self, from the transcendental being. And each time, we keep birthing new beings, and they get birthed into the reality that we created before, and that's our karma. That's how it progresses into the future. That's why it relates to reincarnation. Because you better act right. You want to create the world rightly. It has nothing to do with your afterlife and being judged, and the so-called afterlife. It has to do with the real afterlife in this life, and the life of the transcendental being to come. That's the karma. You create in right or wrong, and that's the life you're going to get next. That's the life we're all next. We're all each other. Everyone who's come before, and everyone who will come in the future is all the same transcendental being. It's all the big being individuated into individual identities that get formed from birth until death. So that's the real karma. That's the real reincarnation. It's not twisted stories that people have altered. As far as I'm concerned anyways, that's the most That's the most logical, the most verifiable, and the most grounded way to look at it. Makes the most sense to me out of all the information I've come across. This is the conception I've constructed through non-contradiction of pure logic, based on the particulars and understandings of concepts through symbols and images that I can understand, and tracing back into the earliest symbols and their original meaning, and the stories and narratives not as literals, but as symbolic, metaphorical, allegorical, and parabolic representations of reality and ourselves. So when you're possessing something, that's a potus s, to be a powerful and able. So yeah, you can take power of things you're not supposed to, or you can actually possess and take ownership and the power in your hands to create the world that should be, and create the karma that should be, so that everyone else that comes after can live in a better world, that they can be reborn based on your past actions, based on everyone's past actions of good deeds or bad deeds, and that creates the world that they're born into. There's your karma. You're reincarnated as the transcendental being, as a small being with an ego personality identity construct based on the karma of previous people. That's how it works. That's the real karma. And I find it's very displeasing to me that even people who really know a lot about the world and the condition still haven't gotten past this aspect of karma, because they haven't delved deeply enough into symbols and understanding the symbols as a reflection of reality, and not as a reflection purely of concepts that aren't grounded in reality. All this speculative imagination that people come up with. It's not knowledge from another source. It's you come up with knowledge yourself. You're not gaining knowledge from anywhere else. Unless you're having channeled contact with entities who are going to probably feed you maybe 99% truth and 1% bullshit, and they're going to send you off on the false path, which is what most of the shit is. All this, the law of one and all this stuff, I started to read it many years ago. I couldn't bear it. It was just so much bullshit. But people buy into it because it's all feel-good stuff. It's purely conceptual fantasy, imagination, and people take it as real because it provides them with a sense of comfort and an answer for what after death, the hole they have in the uncertainty, the unknown, the doubt from death, and it fills the holes of those uncertainties, of those doubts, of those insecurities, because yes, when it comes to death, everyone's insecure about it. I'm less insecure about it because I've come to terms with what I actually am here from birth to death, and what the actual source is through a causal relation of conceptually of the prime cause, the prime mover, when you trace back causality, and that's the transcendental being, the pure being, and the higher being, and how the source of us is coming from there. But that's not us as we are here in the physicality. That's not us. We are not the transcendental being. We can exemplify, embody, become, and live in a reflection of the transcendental being through like a holographic, fractographic, as above, so below correspondence of the higher nature into the lower frequency vibration of this material progression and evolution of universe existence, and of all the dimensions, the 7 previous one that lead to these 4 in our 11-dimensional construct of everything that is. And then beyond that, well, there's the one all, the quote singularity. But that doesn't have a dimension. It's not a human. It doesn't have an identity. It's not anything we anthropomorphize about God. Anything you anthropomorphize about it is false, probably. The only aspects are aspects that don't exist in themselves. So that's why you get the morphogenetic field, because a deer, a cat, a human doesn't exist in itself. It's an individuation which has its own individual expression and is different, because that's what identity is in the multiplicity, diversity, and variability. It wouldn't be multiplicity, variability, and diversity if everything was the same. So that's why we're all separate and we're all divided and we're all individuals, and we've got to work towards evolving ourselves in alignment with higher concepts, higher order consciousness, which we can conceptualize as a transcendental being, truth, love, good, right, morality, natural law, true self, higher will, God, source, spirit, all, singularity, blah, 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 blah. All that stuff. Pure energy, pure consciousness, pure awareness are just ways of making sense that make more sense than other things that make less sense. Or we can just not think about it and just say, but we're here and but do whatever you want. I don't know. Anyways, to continue. So, from possess, potus and s, potus comes from potent, powerful, able, capable, possible, of persons. And of persons is, and when you're talking about powerful, able, capable, and possible, when you're relating that to persons, it's better and preferable, chief, principal, strongest, foremost. So that's the potent. So if you look at my other work on the 3 parts I did on natural law, boundary conditions, spectrum of living, and the philosopher's stone, there's reality as the actual of what is, what currently is, and then there's the potential of what we can make it into be. So the potential of also us, the powerful, able, capable, possible, that's the potent, right? But in terms of people, we can better, what's more preferable, improvement, self-improvement. This is alchemy. The potent, the potential, is from the quote spiritual realm that doesn't yet exist. That's what the ideas and the concepts we can come up with, and trying to envision universal general concepts based on the particulars in reality, and deduce and induce and verify them. These ideas, well, that's the ideal, right? The ideal comes from the idea. So it's all in the spiritual domain of consciousness. That's why the ideal and the potential is looked at as from the spiritual domain and not the material, the matter domain, because the matter domain is the actual and the spirit is the potential. So the potent we have to improve ourselves and better ourselves, the chief principle, strongest, foremost, well, that comes from the chief and principle. What's that? That's the capital, as I've done in explained etymologically. Capital is just chief principle and most important. Well, what's that? That's truth and morality. So betterment, improvement, preferable ways of living, alchemy. Well, it's based. That's also better and preferable is also chief and principle, strongest and foremost. And relates to, well, what's the chief principle, most important thing? What's the foundation of life? What's the most important thing to become alive and become awakened from the coffin, to be rebirthed from the canal into life, and continue to evolve consciousness? Well, that's morality, truth and morality, and care for other beings. That's the potential, is to live in truth and morality, and the reality of the actual, the way we live, and the human world we've created will be a reflection of ourselves, the potent, the potential within our consciousness, the spiritual domain of our thoughts and emotions that we then lead to care and will to act in the world. Well, that's the power we have. That's the ability. Our capabilities and our possibilities come from the quote spiritual domain of the internal aspects, the internal, unseen, hidden quote spiritual aspects of consciousness, which has the ideals of our imagination and the ideas we come up with of what is better and preferable, and what is a better foundation to live from. That's the potent, and that's the potential of the spiritual domain of the transcendental being of truth, love, good, right, morality, natural law. So check out my 3 previous presentations on more of a clarification on that. And potent is from Latin potentia, and that's power, might, force. So the potential, the ideal of a better way, that's the force, the might, and the power that will drive us. That's what we aspire to. And if you look at the spectrum of living, we have our initiation from matter, right? That's where we start, the actual. Well, from that, you have to begin from that initiation into matter. You have to begin from the particulars of substantive reality, and then you work towards the aspirations of the ideal that we can envision and become a reflection of through, holographic, quote, holographic, and quote, fractographic, and quote, as above, so below correspondence, to become initiation from the physical and aspire to the metaphysical, the way, the potential way and path that ought to be. We can create from that potential and make it into the actual in reality. So please do check out the other work I've done on that. It'll bring more clarity of understanding. And it can also be used for wrong. We can have an ideal of evil and a potential. We can use our potential and power and might and force to do evil. So there's always a good and a bad side to owning and possessing. Right now in the material aspect, we own and possess things and we think it's ours and we can do whatever we want because we have the power, the might and the force, the potential, so we can strangle someone, kill them, and rape people and dominate people, and it gives us power and it makes us feel good because we're living from lower fleshly, beastly, carnal, animalistic tendencies of corrupted into lower natures and lower modalities and into evil, and accepting evil as good, and gaining pleasure and joy from wrong and evil and immorality. That's the power we have. Other animals cannot be influenced by symbols and images as much as we can. They cannot be as conditioned as us. They have less power of free will and less creative power. They still have some, but less than us. And they're more running off of the basic programs and limits and boundaries of physical programming and instinctual living as a collective program or whatever in a base operation. But they have free will and they can change things, and you can hear that in other audios. But we have the greatest power and the greatest potential, so that's why we can be even more amoral than the other animals. We can, despite nature being a false balance and a false harmony, in order to provide a sense of equilibrium, to allow greater complexity to arrive without a particular lower order species destroying the whole planet. Well, we have so much power. With great power comes great responsibility. We can create great evil or great good. We have so much power and potential in us because of our capacities of consciousness, expression, and free will, that we can create 1,000,000 times worse than the lower carnal, beastly, fleshly, animalistic tendencies of amoral animals who don't understand morality. We can go 1,000,000 times worse down in the levels and worse than any other animal on this planet because of our power to create and our potential. Because we have more of the capacities of consciousness expressed through the complexity of our physiological body vehicle as a host for that pure awareness to express itself, rather than a rock which doesn't express the pure potential awareness. It's just the awareness of consciousness, whatever God that creates the universe and the energy force. Well, it coalesces from the quantum world into other aspects of matter, and then it becomes a rock. Well, it doesn't have the capacity to express consciousness as an individuation. It's merely a solidified material from the immaterial energy. It just solidified into a rock, and there you go. But when you have greater complexities and biological life, and then organic life, organs, animals, then you have greater complexity, and that consciousness is capable of manifesting itself in reality, capable of expressing itself in reality, as opposed to a rock. Okay. Oh, man. 4 more paragraphs and we'll be done. So this is my explanation on behavior, own, and possess. Behavior is your possession that you enact and manifest into reality. Behave, own, possess, grasp yourself in your own hands, by your own actions. Possess yourself and own yourself, self-ownership, self-governance, self-rulership, sovereign. You are subject to your behavior. It is a measure of your experience in reality. It's a measure. It's how you measure people, is by their behavior. Your actions speak louder than your words. You shall know them by their actions. That is a measure of a man, of a woman, of a human. It's your measure. What's measure related to? Proportion and ratio and comparison. So yeah, we can compare ourselves. All this new age bullshit, you can't compare yourself to other people. No, that's how you learn about truth and morality, and you can see if other people are aligned with truth or not, because you understand truth and you see their behaviors, and oh my god, look at how immoral you are. So yeah, you compare things. That's how you judge, discern, differentiate, and distinguish things in reality, is by comparison. And that's a measurement, a ratio, a proportion. That's what reason, ratio, a proportion, ratio, rational, reason, logic. It all comes related. I've done it in other work. Check my other work. Past few, I don't know, maybe up to 10 audios there. It's included, or I don't know. I've done a lot of work recently. I can't tell you where everything is. It's all it all blends into everything. So that you are subject to your behavior. It is a measure of your experience in reality. The effect you have on reality as an experience. Because we output, if you look at my infographic on causality consciousness and the trivium, we output, our free will choice generates our experience. That's what we output through our actions. That's the experience we have. And when we output into reality, we affect reality, and that affects other people's experience, and in turn, the experience we have from reality is the input, the effect reality has upon us. So you have an effect on reality as an experience. Behavior is what is possessed by a causal agent. The causal agent behaves in certain ways through their action expression of consciousness. The causal agent possesses behavior, the actions they possess that reflect the way they behave. The way we behave what we have to make us who we be, right? Pretty simple now, don't you understand it? The way we behave is what we possess, grasp, hold, own, experience, have very much of, thoroughly, right? Be, when you look at the be in terms of the etymology of the, the word forming element, rather than be as in being. Well, if you look at it as a word forming element, instead of be have what you have to become who you are, because that's what our behaviors and actions reflect, is who we are. They engrave and mark on our character, and all that previously explained in this audio. So the way we behave is what we possess, grasp, hold, own, experience, as in have, very much of, thoroughly, to be in that etymological sense as well. So there's the two aspects of be there. More so than any actual object we could grasp. We own our actions, we own ourselves through our actions. We judge, offend, and insult ourselves through our own actions as a reflection of ourselves. That's what we own and grasp more than anything in reality that we can own and grasp. That's the most ownership we have, is our actions and behavior. The actions we choose to engage in are representative of our level of consciousness. Actions are the most grasped and held in possession of anything we can grasp and hold with our hands, because they directly come from our hands. It's a direct manifestation of our hands. It's the pure potential of our hands creating in the world, is our behavior and our actions, not the other things we can take hold of and grasp a cup or whatever the hell we want to grasp. Actions are done with the hands for the most part, as well as speaking in less direct manner of affecting reality. Most actions come from the hands. They are the tools for the body to manipulate reality with. We grasp the most with our minds, even more so than our hands. So we can grasp things with our minds, right? The vision of our minds. We can take hold of things with our minds, even though we don't grab it with our hands. Most actions comes from the hands. They are tools for the body to manipulate reality with. We grasp the most with our minds, even more so than our hands, but we are talking about physical actions here. The things we grasp, in relation to the things you've ever held onto in your life and the things you've grasped onto, the concepts, the ideas, the information, there's a lot more of that non-material, immaterial, non-physical information, concepts, ideas in our mind, trying to grasp truth, trying to grasp things. It's the internal realm is much larger than the external realm in terms of things we try to get a hold of and make sense of. That's what I'm talking about. But here we're talking about the physical actions. So there's that multiple level, conceptual level aspect of grasping as well. Be is not, quote, to be in the verb, in the sense of the etymological explanation. For be have, they were explaining it not in the sense of the verb. Whereas I also explained it in the sense of the be have. What you have is what you be, what you become. You have in your possession your actions, the behavior is what you become. Judge them, you shall know them by their actions. Actions speak louder than words. This is who we are. This is a representation of who we are. So in that sense, it is the be, to be. Behave. Behavior is that sense as well. But in etymology, they didn't do that aspect. They just said behave is to thoroughly and completely have, grasp, possess, own, and hold. The only thing we have completely in each case and forever are actions and behaviors that we create and manifest of our own free will. We have, own, and bear the weight of our actions, behavior. So in terms of etymology, yes, it's absolutely that. The only thing we thoroughly and completely have, grasp, possess, own, and hold on to is ourselves, our own consciousness. That's the purest level of ownership, possession, holding, grasping, having, thoroughly and completely is our behavior, which is why the root of the word behavior, behave is exactly telling us this. It's exactly listed in the etymology what behavior is, what it represents for us. And as well the additional aspect that's not covered in the etymology related to be and how it relates to be as well. So that's not even in the etymology, but you can understand it as well by understanding what it is be and being and to have and who you become and be. The only thing we have... Okay, so I already read that. There you go. Next paragraph. What we have in our hands is in our power. We are master of it. Our hands give us the power of many potential possibilities. That which we grasp can provide us with additional power. The things we grasp in our minds can especially provide us with the additional power over reality and others through the manipulation of objects in reality and the word of language representing reality. And the language and the words and symbols represent things in reality. And then they can represent concepts. Through those things in reality, they can represent higher order concepts and universals and generals, etc. People can become delusional and grasp, hold, and try to become master of things that are not in their right to do. We think our grasp and hold of something gives us the right to enforce. Might makes right. Control, domination, and enslavement of innocent, sentient, interactive living beings, and that would be all animals. If we think, oh well, just because we are stronger, just because we can possess, just because we have the power and the force to seemingly be master of things, well, that's within our right. We can do whatever we want as humans. That's the delusional structure of the psychopathic predatory dominator system that validates our continued exploitation of everything around us. Been like this for centuries, if not millennia. It's just a perversion in our understanding of reality and ourselves, because we don't understand the true limits and the boundaries, the natural law boundary conditions of law, and how that's for our own betterment and our karma, and to create heaven instead of a hell, and that's how it relates to the future incarnations of ourselves, which we are all ourselves at the lower level, at the pure consciousness level. We're all us. I'm you and you're me. That's why this concept exists. People in the New Age stuff, they talk about this. They may not understand it properly, but that's why they say we're all God and you're God and I'm you and you're me. Well, that's because at the pure level of consciousness that allows us to become who we are as individuated units, using that power of consciousness, that power of awareness, that power of attention, and bringing it into a birth and a death in a particularized ego personality identity construct that is. Alright, this is the last part on right. So the word right. So again, we're talking about, behavior and action and what's better and preferable, chief principle, and the capital chief principle most important is truth and morality, and that's right. Truth, love, good, right, morality, and natural moral law. That's what we're all talking about, what we have to bear and carry in our manner and our character. And we either go right or go wrong. When I'm talking about the hands and the ka and kamat and karma, it's all related to the same thing. It's beautiful once you can see it. Beautiful. So right, to straighten, rule, guide, govern, restore, replace. And then that's the verb. And then we have an adjective. So the adjective right here, morally correct. First thing, morally correct. That's what rightness has to do. The higher rightness has to do with morality. So you can do things that aren't necessarily harming other people, but they're right. You think harming yourself is right? No, it's against natural moral law level 2. Self-inflicted harm is still a harm. The first level is you don't have a right to harm others. You still think you have a right to harm yourself. Well, you have more of a right, but it's still not right. It's still not a right thing to do. It's still not morally correct. It's just a lesser moral violation. And then you have things that don't do harm, like the pleasure trap. Well, go have fun fucking and doing drugs. Are you doing harm? Maybe not. You're in the pleasure trap. Is that right? No, it's not right, and hence it's not morally correct. Because morality has more dimensions. Natural moral law, the will of creation, has more aspects than simply, well, does it cause harm? No, that's level 1. That's level 1 natural moral law. And there's right ways of conduct that are apart from causing harm. There's 3 levels I've come up with so far. And that's in my conceptual levels document that I work on, the infographic. I've only shown it to one person on Facebook, just in passing as in a comment, just to help him on understanding how I understand things, but I haven't shared it with other people. But I've talked about them all in my work. Well, most of them. So we have Old English, right, just, good, fair, proper, fitting, straight, not bent, direct, erect. So that's why we have vitriol visiting the interior of the earth in order to become upright and direct. It's all about morality. The vitriolic truth. Not being an asshole and pretending it's truth, but actually speaking the truth as a truth is love, as if not a lovey-dovey, whatever, gotta make it sound nice to people. No, just a pure truth as it is, because it'll eat away at the falsity. That's why it's vitriolic. It's not that you have to be a bastard, an asshole or anything. It's just that that's what truth does inherently. It's a sword against evil. It destroys evil. That's what it does. That's why vitriol, the truth, it eats away at the falsity. That's why you need the truth, to eat away at the falsity in you, at the shadow, demon, darkness, evil, immorality, and wrong in you, and you can be recreated, reborn from the ashes, rebirthed from the canal of truth, the feminine mother womb of the sky, the stars, which is truth. You can be reborn from the womb over and over into more degrees of truth, into more degrees of being alive, into more the real alive from being dead, right? So the more alive is the more afterlife and the more immortality in terms of this symbolic way. And again, there's the 2 layers of the pure consciousness, pure awareness aspect of immortality, and but there's there's this aspect of looking at it in terms of us and how we become, rather than mortal in the death of the coffin and then tomb, well, we're immortal. We become in the afterlife, so therefore you're immortal. When you come into the afterlife of being awakened and truly alive from being dead, well, you're reborn. There's the afterlife. Well, there's where you're immortal. See, it all makes sense once you start to piece it together. And that's from reg, R-E-G. So you can look at, I guess, a ruler, a straight line. I think it comes from reg as well. So move in a straight line to rule. You see ruler, lead straight to put right. And we have compare the slang straight, which is an adjective, which is honest, moral, and upright. So again, I'm talking about right, straight rule, governing with self-governance and a guide. This is the ruler, the guide, right conduct. The truth is one way, it's straight. That's the guide, the governance to restore and replace ourselves in harmony with natural moral law and the higher will, the higher self, the true nature, human nature. We can correct ourselves with vitriol, the truth, to eat away what's false, our false conditioning, all those false aspects of our ego, personality, identity construct that we formulate from a self-image, self-concept, a worldview, a sense of self, a sense of the world, a sense of reality. Take away what's false and make it right. So straight, honest, morally upright. From Latin rectus, right, literally straight. As you can see, rectus, rec, reg, same thing. G and K, C and K, rec, rectus, reg. which is the root for right and straight, same roots. So there you go. Oh, yeah, an important thing, very important discovery that I made there was Lithuanian, so a cognate, teisus, T-E-I-S-U-S, which is right, true, literally straight. So a cognate for straight in Lithuanian is teisus, and that comes from tension. So here I didn't go into the words, I didn't put them in, but I have an explanation afterwards, but I have the Etymology link to right, straight, stretch, and tension. Okay? Because we're talking about right. We're talking about straightening, right? To go right and morally correct is to straighten it. To become rigid with truth, rigid in morality, just and good and fair. You don't waver off the path. You don't waver off of the one way of truth. You're morally correct. You're straight, on the straight and narrow, right? Get it? You're erect and direct. So which is why the earlier symbolism that we think is all phallic worship, that actually started in the worship of reaching up as a mountain reaches up, and you have the capstone on the obelisk. Well, that's the capstone of wisdom from going up. What's direct and right? The female, the desire, the male desire and care for the female, right? And we're talking symbolically, the penis for the vagina. And you have the phallic symbol is the desire to reach the feminine, the desire from the male earth, Geb, to Nut, the sky, where the stars are, and the sun is, and the representative of the light and truth. And the ingots of the sky are all aspects of truth in the sky, the mother goddess, the womb that gives birth to the sky, the womb, the feminine, the creator that generates the truth and gives birth to the truth and reality and everything in the right way. Well, so the obelisk and the phallic worship is the male desire for the feminine, for the stars, for the truth, for the light. So that's why the top of the capstone is the wisdom of the right way, the right action in alignment with the truth of the stars and the light. So the obelisk is straight and erect for that reason, because it represents the masculine desire for the feminine to rise up towards the feminine principles and the sky and the stars and the truth, love, good, right, morality, ma'at, truth and order and justice. Okay? That's the original symbolism, and then it gets perverted into, oh well, they were sex obsessed. It's a false understanding. That was an aspect of the perversions that later came about, and the secret societies that treated these things literally, and then it became about sex worship and phallic worship, and it's still going on now, and it's the perversions that have existed for thousands of years, all based on lower base, carnal, fleshly, beastly consciousness of the pleasure trap. Yet these delusional fucks think that they're actually evolved in consciousness by engaging in all this sex worship and all this pleasure shit. I view tantric shit as similar to that too. It's all based in false understandings and pleasure gratification. It's all pleasure. Are you evolving consciousness? Are you becoming more moral? Go have tantric sex? Go fuck yourself. You're a retard. Why don't you search for actual truth and morality rather than be guided by your dick or your pussy and all the pleasure you derive from all that shit? Keeps you down in consciousness, doesn't rise you up. All you stupid secret societies and all your sex worship and stupid sexual rites and rituals. Bunch of morons. Yeah, why do you think we're all perverted? Why do you think we're all degenerated? Not supposed to be the elite? They're more degenerated than us, and they're more perverted and even lower base consciousness. And they look at themselves as elite, and those are the ones controlling us and raping children. Because it's all about pleasure and all about themselves. Satanism, my survival, my freedom, my truth. It's all from a self-centered aspect. Okay, so we got right, straight, stretch, and tension. You put something straight that wasn't straight, you're stretching it, right? You're stretching it out, making it straight. And what's stretching? Well, you're applying tension. You're applying a tensional force. Now, this all relates to other work I've done and work that's coming into the future in terms of the friction, interference, tension, pressure, and conflict that comes inherently with the sword of truth against falsity, with the acid, vitriolic, belligerent nature of truth against falsity. You're not going to waver off the path. You're not going to become an acquiescent gymnastics mental hoop jumper, wavering and weavering past people's insecurities and delicate sensibilities to feed them the truth that they want to accept. No, you're going to speak the truth as it is, straight, right, direct, and it will create tension, it will create conflict, it will create pressure, it will create interference. But that's what the truth does against falsity. It is an inherent aspect, a universal truth about truth itself. That's what it does. Do you know why? Because in order for change to happen, you have to be made aware of how you are living wrongly, and you have to become in a position of discomfort to bring you to care, ultimately care more about yourself, but that original discomfort will bring you to care about why you have that discomfort and how to alleviate that discomfort. And the only true way to alleviate that discomfort that's created from your misalignment with truth that has been brought to light because you were living in darkness, and then the truth is brought to light and it blinds you and it hurts you because it's so blind, and that's the tension and pressure and conflict that brings you into the discomfort. Truth and morality is the only thing that can bring you the comfort again. That's the warm blanket of truth, the light, the sun, the light, the heat. That's the warmth, and that's the real comfort. People get too comfortable in the delusional fantasies and beliefs of from the insecurity, doubt, and the darkness and the void of not having an answer, and can create psychological pressure and tension from having the fear and the doubt and the insecurity. So people attach to false beliefs because they provide false security, false comfort. But truth is the only way out. So here's my explanation. Right is not wrong, not bent. Because when you waver off the path, you go wavering, well, you're bending the path. It's going all over the place. If you want to understand that more, go look into Language and Reality Part 4 on, what did I call it? The Dark Trivium? Limited Trivium? I don't remember what I called it. It has to do with the dark and limited aspects of the Trivium, and people who value more rhetoric and convincing people rather than just speaking the truth as it is. Not as calling people out as a moronic piece of shit, retard status like some morons on Facebook like to do, but not just speak the truth as it is, as it honestly is. And if someone is lacking care and compassion, when you tell them you have a deadened care, deadened compassion, deadened conscience, and deadened morality, that's what I tell them, carnists. It's true. If someone's being a moron because they're not facing reality, well, then they're being a moron. You don't have to tell them. But if you're telling them it because they are it, well, then they are being it. And it's up to them to not be a moron. Go learn truth and morality. Stop being attached to your bullshit. So anyways, right is not wrong, not bent. It is straight and direct, proper, fair, just. We are supposed to be replacing the wrongs, the evil, with right and good. To be restoring ourselves, as a phoenix is reborn from the ashes, with what is right, good, and true. That's the process of continual restoration, continual reformation as a chameleon shapeshifter, reforming our clay, reforming ourselves internally in not our physical form, but the form that actually matters as who we are as a reflection through our behaviors and our actions, the form internally of our thoughts and emotions that lead to the form externally of our actions. So there's two parts to form, two conceptual levels to form as well. The more we align and unite with truth and morality, the more we self-govern ourselves to direct, control, and regulate our behavior, set apart from the falsity we are accustomed and normalized to. Because we're accustomed to the acceptable, normalized, the standard normalized acceptability spectrum of what is right and that directs and controls and regulates our behavior, because we're a reflection, a condition, where we mirror a society when we grow up and form our ego, personality, identity constructs, our sense of self, our sense of reality, sense of right and wrong, and what we should do, what we shouldn't do, and that's all corrupted based on these false, standardized, normalized norms of acceptability. So from right, we get to straight, to stretch, to tight, and tension. Make sense? Sure as hell makes sense to me. Explaining things, so explain, to define a thing, make, level, flatten. So again, when we're explaining things, you're defining it, right? You're explaining something, trying to get a comprehension to someone else, or you're explaining it to yourself, whatever. You're defining a thing, you're making it level, which is explain. Planar, a plane is flat, that's where the word comes from. I think I've detailed it in some other work, or I went into explain. I'm not sure. So here I don't have it laid out in the article, but I'm doing it verbally. So x out, and plane. So out of the plane, just like for existence was the same thing, similar, where you had the plane, or I'm saying you have formlessness, and then you have the things in the form that come out, the things that are propped up, because existence is X, and then I forget what the other part was, but it had to do with propping up and things that were visible. You know, you prop things up. So if you have a pop-up book, you know, everything's flat, but when you prop them up, things pop up, and that's existence from something that was flat, a plane, and then it pops up from the plane. You can go look at that as axioms, existence, consciousness, and identity, the previous audio I've done. And so you have so X plane is you're trying to make level and flatten in order to provide to make it straight and right, to make it simple. You're defining it. You're not looking at everything together. So here it's another way. It's not exist from the things in existence that pop out. You're going to try to not have a bunch of things popping out to make it so confusing. You're trying to explain something. You're trying to make level and flatten a concept so that someone can understand it apart from everything else, I guess. You're stretching it out, spreading out, reach, and you're extending towards it. So when you stretch out, you spread out, you reach, you extend towards it. And I guess you could say you grasp it, and then you can take it, and then you can flatten it out to look at it just as in itself, rather than as everything being propped up and all together. That's just a creative way of explaining it there. I'd have to go look back at the etymology again. So explaining things is to stretch out towards part of reality. So you're stretching out, you're explaining something in reality. You're not going to explain everything at once. You have to stretch out to parts of reality. You grasp them, and then you describe what you grasp. And then you flatten out in your mind to see what its attributes are, to identify it as what it is and form a definition. So you can look at it as a multidimensional array, if you understand programming, where you have an array of reality, the extant objects in existence, and then you particularize one of those from that array of things in existence. So that array of bunch of things, a multidimensional array, you take one of those things, one of that array, and within that array it has an array of itself. And the array is the attributes, the characteristics, the qualities of things within that thing that you grabbed. So you grab one thing from an array, and then within that one thing it has an array as well. So you have to take that one thing that's propped up, and you have to flatten it out so that you can see the array within that that thing that you grasped that was in the array of existence. So when you grasp it, you flatten it out, and then you can see within that part of the array that you just grasped in existence, you flatten it out, and then you see the other array, all the things within the thing you grasped, and that's the characteristics, attributes, properties, qualities, and aspects of that thing in existence. And when you look at just existence, well, existence, all the things in existence themselves are attributes, characteristics, properties, qualities, and aspects of things in existence, which is the multiplicity, diversity, and variability of things in existence. So if you understand programming, which I guess many people don't, and I guess that inhibits their understanding of how reality is created, because it really helps to explain And logic. Programming will help you learn logic very well, because it's cause and effect, which is morality. So many things are related. Learn. Learning is a gift. We have the gift of consciousness. It's amazing. People give me gifts and I'm like, well, I don't want this. All I want you is to learn. That's what I tell people. The only thing I want from you is to learn. I want you to learn. But they still don't want to learn. And the things I don't even know what to talk to them about. They don't really care. And the things I talk about are so high in consciousness they won't even understand what I'm talking about. I don't know. I guess I gotta go back to just morality and just ask, do you know what morality is? Do you know what a wrong is? Yeah. I'm gonna go back to talking to people about that. It's the basics, the real basics. Do you know what logic is? I gotta start even more basic. Do you know how to think? Do you know what a particular is and what a universal is? Oh my god, how much learning people have to do to process reality correctly. Anyways, it's a joke. It's a cosmic joke. Here we are. Self-inflicted suffering, self-imposed enslavement, and no one cares about truth and morality to get themselves out of it. It's a funny joke and it's so sad. I have tears coming from my eyes at the same time as I'm laughing because it's so fucking pathetic. Anyways. Just taking a more breather moment there because it really is sad. So, there is a pressure pushing when we show the light of truth to the falsity people are attached to. We are stretching them away from falsity with the tension of truth. There is resistance. Of course, they're attached to falsity. They don't want to let go. This is the problem with attachment. This is the problem with beliefs. Is you become attached to the belief. And then when you have your belief, this is an infographic I just made in a recent posting I did on symbols, reality, knowledge, belief, and attachment. Is when you have your attachment to a belief, that's all you have. The reality that's on the both sides of your belief, you're not seeing it. It's in the darkness for you because you're blinded in your myopic tunnel view. And you're resistant to truth. You're resistant to reality on either sides because you're so attached to your belief. Bah. Both to the impact of truth and pressure, there is resistance both to the impact to truth in pressure. So your resistance to that pressure that the truth provides, you're like, that's too much pressure. It's going to make you blow up. Yeah, it'll make you blow up your bullshit falsity that you're attached to. It'll pop your bubble of delusional bullshit, your delusional bubble of reality that you live in. The truth is going to put pressure and it's going to pop your bubble. You're damn straight it will. So both to the impact of truth and pressure and to the tensional truth that grasps onto us and is pulling us away from falsity is met with resistance from the attachment to our false self, our false way of living, and the general falsity all around we conceive as an accurate representation of reality. So both we have the pressure on us and we have the pressure of truth pulling us away from our falsity. So there's both the pressure and the tension. There's the two aspects you can look at it. And there's resistance to both ways. There's the resistance of the truth popping our bubble of bullshit, and there's the resistance of the truth pulling us away from our bullshit. So I guess that's another conceptual level, 2 levels there. Alright, the last paragraph. This audio will be just over 3 hours. Doing wrong, evil, creates tension and pressure within ourselves, whether you want to recognize it or not. It does. Why? Because it takes you away from your true being, the true nature, human nature, the true self, the higher will, of actualizing ourselves as lower beings in aspects of the transcendental, higher big being. So doing wrong, evil creates tension and pressure within ourselves, all on our own, which is why we judge, offend, and insult ourselves. We create our own karma. We create our own hell, we create our own conditions, all on our own, self-inflicted suffering and self-imposed enslavement, all on our own, if we have the capacity to feel it. We do wrong, evil, creates tension and pressure within ourselves if we have the capacity to feel it. So a lot of people ignore the tension and the pressure and the conflict they have within themselves and how they're not aligning with truth. A lot of people ignore it. So you can recognize it if you have the capacity to feel it. That's why people who are deadened in compassion and empathy, conscience, morality, deadened care, and deadened heart center, well, they can't feel the wrongs they do. They can't feel the conflict they have, the conflict of their false perceptions with reality and how things aren't working out. And they're continually confused and trying, some of them try to exert external control through their confusion, as per the natural law expressions chart Mark Passio made. So this is truth and morality expressing itself in your being. So if you're capable of feeling the conflict, well, that's because you're capable of feeling the expressions of truth in your being that aren't being harmonized with. You recognize that what's currently being done, the wrong and evil, the tension, well, that's a tension between the false and the true, the good and the wrong and the good, the evil and the wrong and the right, the evil and the good. So you feel it, you suffer it, the passion, you bear and carry it, you own that behavior and that action. And from that tension, well, it can bring you to change. From that discomfort, as I talked about earlier, it can bring you to change. And that's what I forgot to mention, is that through that discomfort, it can bring you to work on yourself and figure out why that's there, and then to change yourself and change your behavior and change your actions. You carry the weight of that evil and misdeed. Feeling this is a natural phenomena that I can describe as a connection, aligning with the true self, and receiving a feedback of intuitive apprehension as to something being wrong, as it is felt internally, even though it may not yet be understood as the proper signal to question reality more closely. So that it's the connection, the alleged connection. So what I'm saying, feeling is a natural phenomenon that I can describe as a connecting, aligning with the true self. That I can describe. I'm using it as a method of describing what's happening. So intuitively, you do something wrong, and intuitively you feel it's wrong, or you know it's wrong. Well, why? Well, it's possible that there is, our original natures, our original being, and then we're imposed with the conditioning of the falsity of reality and how that imposes upon us based on previous people's actions, their karma they've created. Well, that allows us to be born into this world as a reincarnation, quote, reincarnation, and then we have to deal with the karma of the past life that we created, because we're all the same pure consciousness awareness at that higher level, not as each individuated unit here. So we create that, and we have to feel that. And when we feel it, well, it might be actually a connection to our core being, the heart of man, the spirit of man, the quintessence, which is the true self, the higher will, the transcendental being. Well, we feel that intuitively. We feel that intuitively, possibly as a connection and alignment, from that core being that we're supposed to be, and it's purveying through the darkness and the barriers we have, and it's shining through. Even though we have the barriers and stuff and we can't see it, there might be, when we do it wrong because of the feeling, that's why the care, that the emotions, and the care is the quote spirit in which we do things, our motivation and our drive. So when we feel things in the emotional internal capacities of consciousness, and then the quote spiritual internal consciousness, because they're internal and unseen, it's not in the material, it's quote spiritual. So we have that capacity in the emotions that brings us the feeling, which allows us to quote connect and quote align with our quote heart of man, the quote spirit of man, the quote quintessence. And then we receive a feedback of, intuitive apprehension. And I also like to say, well, there's the intuitive induction of just intuiting and inducting ideas, which can be a shot in the dark and it might be complete bullshit. There's that aspect of intuition. And then there's this aspect of intuition, of more meaningful aspects of recognizing wrongs, not of intuitively and inductively imagining concepts and universals and general ideas, but of intuitively feeling with intuition the wrong and right. It's not about feeling with intuition ideas. You don't feel your way to ideas. You have to think them through logic, induction, and deduction. This kind of feeling and intuition applies here with morality, with our actions and behaviors. That's the feeling kind of intuitive. The other kind of intuition is related to, quote, mind, and the kind of intuition I'm talking about here is related to the, quote, heart. So there's the intuition of the mind and the intuition of the heart. There's another conceptual level framework. So feeling this is a natural phenomenon that I can describe as connecting, quote, aligning with the true self and receiving a feedback of intuitive apprehension as to something being wrong, as it is felt internally, even though it may not yet be understood as the proper signal to question reality more closely. Because as well, when you feel something, anger, hurt, pain, it can be a signal to look at reality more closely, to see how you are in misalignment with the truth and of reality as it should be, or how reality is in misalignment with the reality that should be. So the reality as it is, it has horror and evil and darkness. Well, you can recognize that that shouldn't be, and you can also recognize how you aren't in alignment with the things that should be, or how you aren't in alignment with how reality currently is, and you have false expectations. So the negative things can be a signal as well to question reality more closely. Now, what intuition is not you receiving information from your true self. It's not knowledge from the true self about a concept. So you hear a concept, someone induces symbols and images from a book or an audio or a video, and oh, I intuitively feel that that's right. No, that's not what intuition is for. It's not to discern the truth. Intuition is to inductively in the mind, and when you're looking for truth in terms of reality, in terms of a concept being real or not, in terms of information being real, you don't use intuition in the, quote, heart capacity, because that's for feeling the wrongs. That's what the, quote, heart is for, to feel the wrongs so then you can change them. That's the intuition there. But the intuition of the mind is to intuitively conceive of, induct universal general concepts, and then deduct back, because you're going to take a stab in the dark with the intuition to conceive something. It just came to you. It was an inductive, intuitive insight. But you need to verify that shot in the dark. It might just be bullshit. You might be grasping at something, and you might just be grasping at a pile of shit. You need to actually bring in the light of logic through deduction to find the truth, because that's what the deductive process helps with. Then you're going to shine the light, and you're going to trace it back to reality, and you're going to see, well, with the light, am I actually holding a pile of shit, or am I actually holding something real? So that's the in the mind intuitive, you need the deduction from the induction intuition to verify. So you can't just say, oh, a concept that you feel, oh, it feels right. No, that's just, it sounds good, it feels good, because it's playing off your insecurities and your fears and the questions you don't have answers to, and the questions you feel you need an answer to give meaning to your life, to have a self-worth, a self-image, to be to be secure with yourself, to have the self-worth and self-image and the worldview construct, so that all of that makes you feel good. That's the bad kind of intuition. You do not want to use that to make sense of what is true in reality and what is true of a concept. The proper kind of feeling intuition is for rights and wrongs of a moral kind, so that you can feel them internally, and as a proper signal to question yourself in reality, because you feel that disharmony with what is right. And some people don't have that. They're deadened in the heart center and the heart capacity, because again, the heart of man, the quote heart of man, the quote spirit of man, the quote quintessence is that same thing, which is supposed to be representative of the true self as related to morality. And because you're feeling morality, because the morality is the aspects of transcendental being, of truth, love, good, right, morality, and you're feeling the aspects of that transcendental being, which is feeling your true self. You understand? So the core being, the true nature, that's what you're feeling. That's what you possibly have a connection and alignment to, because you're more connected in the heart. You have a more developed heart center. You have a more developed care. You have the more developed compassion, empathy, morality, conscience. It can also be described in other ways, such as a feedback with reality that contradicts the unreality and false harmony conceived of in the mind that led to those actions. So because you falsely believed in something, well, then you're going to feel it, and then you can induct, you can have a feedback between the contradictions between your internal nature. You know how your thoughts, emotions, and actions are supposed to unite. But when something happens, then you feel it, and then it contradicts with your thoughts. That's because your thoughts were false, and then so you have to correct your thoughts, and this is one process that can lead you to correct your thoughts that's in the mind that led to those wrong actions. When you correct your thoughts in alignment with how you feel, in alignment to the true self of morality, because you feel the right and wrong, which is relating to morality of the true self, the transcendental being, and then that can allow you to correct your thoughts which were poisoned through induction and maybe false intuition of just blindly accepting things because they felt good through emotional mind control. So again, it wasn't just the thoughts that were to blame, it's thoughts and emotions, because it's always a feedback going through it. If you look at my Trinity of Consciousness explanations, and it's always a feedback that's happening. So that's why you have emotional mind control, and the things that can feel good through false intuition, as I just explained, well, they can feel good, and then you buy into them, and then you accept them in your mind. And then later, when some action happens, well, the action, well, what's that a result of? Oh, it's a result of my thinking this way, which was based on my emotional mind control of accepting it as a concept that I should live my life by. And now it produced this wrong action, which I'm now feeling as wrong, and now I can correct it. And it's part of learning mistakes and stuff. Those who are so enamored and entrenched, well, you can learn from reality too. You don't have to do the mistakes. You can feel secondary experience from a story, from a movie, from literature, etc. You can learn a lot from fiction. I've learned a lot from movies and fictional representations of reality that represent morality and doing good or doing evil. Those who are so enamored and entrenched into the false self and false living have a greatly diminished capacity to feel wrongs. These would be primary psychopaths, as Mark Passio has explained it. People who have generally have a lack of feeling, which is why I delineate from that explanation recently, because psychopath, you're suffering in the mind. Or are they suffering in the mind? And that's where they're suffering, even if they don't know it. But they're not suffering in feelings in the quote heart. But you see, the mind is actually the heart, because if the mind is consciousness, well, the consciousness is the quote mind and the quote heart, because it's both your thoughts and emotions is your consciousness internally. So if you're suffering in the mind as a psychopath, maybe it means that you're suffering in heart and mind, in thought and emotion, because as an aspect of consciousness. So if that's the way it is, then if these psychopaths aren't feeling, then they're not suffering in the capacity of feeling, but they are suffering, but they're not even aware that they're suffering. So in that sense, then I guess they could still be psychopaths. It's just that they're not aware of their own suffering, even though they're suffering. And because they're not aware of their own suffering, they're going to project that suffering outwards through that confusion, and they're going to project suffering and create suffering through external control. So that's another way of looking at the natural law expressions, is through their own ignorance of how they are suffering. They don't even understand how they're suffering in consciousness, either in thought or emotion, in quote mind or quote heart. That becomes a confusion through that ignorance, and then it projects as external control and to create suffering for others, and that's why they're primary psychopaths. That's one way of looking at it as well. So the rest of us are conditioned and programmed into secondary psychopathy, into creating suffering into the world by creating evil. We're conditioned into falsity and conditioned into perpetuating evil, and hence we're conditioned into becoming secondary psychopaths within the predatory dominator psychopathic system we live. That's why I call it the psychopathic predatory dominator system, because we're conditioned into being psychopathic predatory dominators. That's the way we live. So we create suffering into the world. That's why it's self-inflicted suffering. We are a reflection of the conditioning of our environment. Again, karma, again, reincarnation, how it really works. And we are the only ones that can correct it. And it's based on where we are now. Our current karmic condition is based on our past lives, the way we reincarnated from the people who lived before. We're all the same. We're all the same pure consciousness awareness. That's the reincarnation. That's the past lives. Everyone before us is all our past lives, and everyone that's living now is our concurrent life that we concurrently, collectively co-create in the aggregate karma. This is the real karma. People don't understand. I lost my position. My cat was on my keyboard. Okay. Knowledge, truth, and morality is the way and path back to the true self. It is part of self-knowledge. That's the self-knowledge that matters. Not this imaginary, I don't know, whatever else you want to think of self-knowledge. Self-knowledge has to do with self-actualization, has to do with self-realization. What's the self we're talking about? We're not talking about some imaginary personality, identity, middleman conception that doesn't hold any validity, doesn't hold any water. And all the knowledge I've gained in my life, it doesn't hold any water, that conception. Zero. It's still a possibility, but doesn't hold any water, as far as I understand things. Our true self, the higher self, is not that imagined middleman, separate personality identity. The true self is where the self-knowledge comes from, for us to self-actualize ourselves and self-realize ourselves as the true self, as the higher self, as the higher will, which is this transcendental being, the aspects of the transcendental being which are truth, love, good, right, morality, natural, moral law. So that's the real self-knowledge, is knowing truth and morality. That's the way and path. That's why when you're reborn into your real life, your real self, you're becoming your real self, you're really alive from the dead in the tomb, you're really alive from the dead in the tomb, reborn, reawakened, rebirthed, resurrected from the death, into the afterlife, into immortality. This is the way and the path. So that's the end of my audio. Wow. Well, I found it very informative, even for me to explain all this. It helps in my own understanding and helps refine things for me. So thank you to me, to myself, for what I did, because I appreciate what I did for myself here. And thank you for everyone for listening. Thank you very much. Thank you for your time and attention, the most valuable currencies, as I explained in this article as well, briefly. Thank you very much. Have a nice day. Take care. Peace.